OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Yeah, you're very welcome along this Tuesday morning to OTB AM. It's Chair Gilroy and Eoin Sheahan with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. As ever, if you want to get anything off your chest, you can WhatsApp us. 0879 180 180 is the number. Or, of course, you can always drop us a comment in whatever stream you're watching this on YouTube, or use the hashtag OTBAM on Twitter as well. The best place to get us these days, of course, is the OTB Sports app. Now, I'll tell you what's coming up. Got Daniel Harris on the very latest happenings at Manchester United, where he has accurately predicted the whole way along what's going to happen with Jadon Sancho. That deal looks imminent. Alexis Sanchez looks to be on his way out. We'll bring you through the sports pages and the top stories. Our Gillette pressure rankings. Plenty of candidates over the course of the weekend. We've got Eddie Brennan joining us around about 9:20 this morning, and we're going to find out how things are going at least, but also, given that things aren't actually happening at the moment, we'll talk to him about the 5 best inside forwards that he ever saw or has heard of or wants to talk about around about 9:20. And then Deal or No Deal with Stephen Doyle coming your way at around about 9:40. First up this morning, we're going to hear from Kieran Cunningham and Dan McDonald from the Sunday Paper Review. Enjoy.
We were talking to Donal O'Neill, one of the co-founders of the GPA during the week. His feeling was that the GPA has gone a little bit soft, that they've been stuck in a bit of a rut compromise-wise because of the deal that they cut with the GAA. And he feels that once financing came in from the GAA to the GPA, that effectively it was a better deal for the GAA because it offered them control. Now, the GPA are trying to renegotiate this. Is Paul Flynn being a bit optimistic and trying to get a deal with the GAA on terms of this agreement before the end of John Horne's term?
Well, I would think there's pressure on because the current deal is about to expire pretty soon, and also because of what COVID-19 is doing to the GAA's finances, or will do to the GAA's finances, is likely to leave a massive hole. So if they wait a year, it might be very, very hard to get anything like what they want or what they expect. So I think that there is pressure for them to do business as soon as they can. I'm sure I would say yourself and Dan agree, but it's kind of hard to plow your way through this GPA stuff because it's kind of been very repetitive. Like the same things have been said about the GPA for years. Depending on who you're reading, you often know what they think because they've made it very clear their opinion either way. And a lot of it is opposition to the GPA. There is a lot of opposition, particularly among prominent columnists and among certain of the journalists as well. And you know, like Paul Flynn was very keen for people to stress the positive work they do, the amount of players they help and the programs they have for welfare and mental health, etc. And those numbers are out there, though I think they would have been keen to get those numbers out there. But there's quite a focus on salaries within the GPA, and you know the wages for the top senior executives is an average of nearly over €112,000 a year. And the average total bill for the six other employees is $293,000, an average of nearly $49,000 a year. You know, and it's right to highlight that and ask, is that value, are they paying over the odds? But at the same time, I think the same question should be asked of the GAA. The 14 top executives of the GAA earn an average of $125,000 a year each. You know, so you know, if you're going to scrutinise one, you have to scrutinise them all. And I think as well, when you do focus on salaries, people living in Dublin, you need a quite decent salary to be able to live in Dublin properly. You know, if you have any ambition to buy a house or even to be rent a decent place, and a lot of places don't pay well enough. So perhaps the GPA paid a bit over the odds, but there's a hell of a lot of people in Dublin who pay way under the odds.
Yeah, I think Donal O'Neill made a very fair point when he was on speaking to Joe on Tuesday night just gone too, when they were talking about the GPA and the amount of money that flows through in terms of government funding and funding from the GAA. Around 70% of their income comes from the two sources. The point he was making was that the GPA will continue to require money at the levels that they're taking it from, while the GAA continues to be a financial monster. So while the GAA continues to do deals with multinationals and they're bringing in big money in terms of their gate receipts and in terms of their commercial arrangements, understandably the GPA, as they represent the players, will try and take as much of a cut from that money as they possibly can, particularly given this is an amateur organisation.
It's easy to forget as well, Will, how necessary the GPA was. Because I remember for years, the GPA was founded 21 years ago, the amount of interviews you do with GA players or read with GA players or listen to with GA players, they all brought up the same stuff. They all brought up how badly they were treated, the struggle to get basic mileage expenses from county boards. You know, you had stuff like county board officials would be going out checking cars after training to see if there were 2 or 3 players in the car, and they were all claiming for mileage, mileage would have been 10 pence a mile or something. You know, the struggle they had to get training gear or football boots or anything. So players were treated really badly for years, and there were a couple of attempts made to start up players' unions in the past, and they fell at the wayside very quickly. So Dessie Farrell in particular is a pivotal figure in the history of the GA because he stuck with it, took a lot of criticism for it, and put it on a solid founding. And I know some players who has helped greatly and fallen on hard times and has got them out of a hole. And a lot of the work they don't publicise because a lot of it is stuff that the players themselves wouldn't want publicised. So I think it's become very, very fashionable to bash them and think they're, you know, the great Satan. But I think the GPA is essential. But because of the GA model, you know, it's got this kind of amateurism that isn't really amateurism. It's financed by a governing body, which is a very strange relationship for a players' union. And it's something you wouldn't get in other sports because obviously most other sports have a professional element. So it's facing into an interesting 10 years, and the 10 years that it'll shape could be very different to the shape it's in now, I think.
Yeah, the risk.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it's my curiosity at coming at it from a sort of an external view to some degree is to what is the function of it supposed to be, you know? Because I am, like as I said, like the whole relationship of being under the wing to some degree and being reliant on funding support from, in theory, the association, the GA that you're meant to be holding to account by representing your members. There's obviously a sort of an element of a conflict of interest there, and I appreciate there's probably all these welfare programs and so on. I'm probably more used in my parish to like the PFAI, who are now they actually had an issue of perception because their offices are in the FAI, but probably shouldn't be really in all reality, but that was a practical thing. But like the optics of that aren't great. But they've had a situation in recent years where they've been in full-on conflict with the FAI, where they've basically been barred from speaking to people. And that's not necessarily, I appreciate there's a professional element, but they were also very much involved with the women's football team dispute, some of whom would be, amateur players effectively, and looking for issues of compensation around time off work and stuff like that. So, like, I suppose, I read Colin O'Rourke's piece, and he's talking about GPA getting involved in sort of club fixture debates and stuff like that, which to me would strike me as maybe not what it's meant to be about, and that surely it is about the why is it viewed as some kind of Satan, Kieran? Is it just because they might be? I saw some reference somewhere to like semi-professionalism and this being like the view that the GPA might be trying to lead people towards that. Is that why there's a skepticism of them? Is that basically where it's born from?
Yeah, that's largely it, Dan. Like it's seen as mercenary, it's seen as money grabbing. People bring up they've done fundraising gigs in America, fundraising dinners. They have this Super 11s hurling format they've taken to the States as a fundraising vehicle. And that's rattled a lot of cages, both in terms of people saying, this is money that should be going to the New York GA or the Boston GA, or that counties would be going over trying to raise their own money, and GPA have been there before them, or, shaking the bucket around at the same time as them. So, no, a lot of people do see them as a Trojan horse, that they're trying to usher in some form of professionalism, but some form of professionalism is there anyway, because all inter-county players get a government grant now. So even though it's a tiny payment for a lot of them, they are paid. They're paid a sum. And a lot of the people around inter-county teams are paid. There's quite a large staff in Croke Park that are paid, and a lot of them are paid very well. So the GA is. It's very hard to make sense of what the GA is, because it's moved on from what it is in basically its mission statement. If you look at the mission statement, it's it conflicts with the reality now. Like, it's not really the amateur sports body that it claims to be anymore. So the GPA accept the reality of that, and they're pushing against the boundaries. Now, they've always stressed they don't want full-blown professionalism, but they do want to get as much for their members as they can.
It's not to overly simplify what's in the papers about the GPA today. You do have kind of two sides of the argument. You've Colin O'Rourke's piece in the Sunday Independent where he's arguing that the GPA now needs a culture of giving as opposed to taking. And as mentioned by Kieran, he's also arguing that maybe the GPA should be stronger on the club fixture story. Mick Foley, who's writing in the Sunday Times on page 12 today, has also looked at the negative perception of the GPA, where there's a lot of focus on the money that works through the coffers, but maybe not some of the programmes that they put in place, like educational grants, like training that they provide to some of their players. So both sides of the GPA shown there. Jumping towards football, Dan, you mentioned Paul Rowan had a piece in the Sunday Times. It's on page 5 of the Sunday Times today, where he's writing about what's been happening in the FAI over the last little while. And to me, this seems to be very much framed as the FAI's old guard are now fighting back somewhat towards the new group that have come in.
Yeah, like the FAI story is still continuing. You know, it's continuing. We're well on over 18 months here now. If you take the Sunday Times 100 grand story as a start point in that, but even prior to that, a couple of months previously, there'd been stuff about governance and term limits and whatnot, and like it continues, and it hasn't gone away. Like sometimes it falls guilty, it falls guilty to some of this, that like any story that's too heavily sort of acronym heavy. It's a bit like the GPA stuff, and you talk about GPA and CPA and like the FAI stuff. I mean, I'm doing a lot of days, FAI and the Memorandum of Understanding, and you're referencing various reports and reforms, and like I think that it's actually a challenge to keep it fresh and to keep it entertaining for people, because I can only just measure this by maybe engagement that I have with my own stuff that I've done around it, that like I think people are sort of following things now, but it's actually more of a committed group that are following it, and I think a lot of the general public are tuned out to some degree. They want to know what's going to happen with John Delaney and so on, like a lot of the big picture stuff, but maybe some of the governance stuff that's going on at the moment is harder. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not important what's happening at the moment. Of course it is. There actually is, there's some significant stuff happening, but I think maybe in some respects, a degree of the public disinterest reflects some of the problems that are being faced by a faction of people here. So you frame it there as like the old guard and the new guard. And again, I'm wary of getting bogged down into it. But basically what's happened is that there is a new FAI board, which essentially the most powerful people on it now are people who are from the independent directorship area. These are people who have not been elected through football channels. They've been appointed through a process, however clear that process may be. And they are now really calling the shots in the FAI. And what we've seen in the last couple of months is an attempted fight back from people from the so-called old guard, or just to put it more simple terms, people who've been elected through football governance routes, through various committees and the local FAs or whatever. The
phrase is the football family, Dan, I think is what it used to be. The football
family, as it's been called. I mean, it was called the football family for years, except it was a family where just one person decided, who got what at the family table. But now it's a family that it's meant to work together. But of course, it's horrendously dysfunctional because it was never a properly functioning family in the first place, because everyone just looked after themselves and didn't really worry about anyone else at the table. So what we have is a situation where there's a fight back, there's a move towards having half of the board made up of independent directors, and there was a view amongst people in the football community side of things that the new government might change things and decide that some of these old reforms that were being brought in were going too far, and that a new government would maybe resist some of these changes. But what's happened is the new government are basically saying, no, we're ploughing ahead with these changes, which will give a lot more control to independent directors and not the elected FAI appointees. That's all fine. I can feel myself losing people already, because a lot of people are just like, there is an element of, well, okay, what does this mean here? What's going on? But what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is Mark McSharry, for example, in the Dáil, bringing the issue of the FAI's control to a national level again. And the viewpoint is now that are we giving over control of the FAI to outside interests, in inverted commas, completely? That will the FAI be run by people from outside the game? And this is supposed to, I think, energise people and enliven people. And there's people going to FIFA and UEFA and suggesting that Irish football is going to be this outlier compared to all of FIFA's 200 plus member nations, that we're going to have these shadowy interests running the game compared to, well, we could have the people elected through, our channels should have the greater say. That should always be the way. But the problem is, and I think from the public's perception, and I think that the government have backed this up, there's a view that, well, you've sort of had your chance. You didn't do a very good job. For years, there was a system there which proved that the system of bringing the FAI, populating the FAI board with people coming through constituencies, it didn't work. And in reality, a lot of it has been interpreted as a last attempt by the old guard to preserve their positions rather than a broader debate on what we should do. Now, someone said it. Someone actually put it very well to me the other day. I spoke to who's involved in this, and they actually said that actually there are some of the correct questions are being asked about the new FAI at the moment, but they're being asked by the wrong people. And I sort of subscribe to that. I think there's valid questions about the process and how things have happened over the last 6 months, but it's very hard to take seriously the claims of people who have suddenly found their voice, having said nothing, absolutely nothing for 16 years, and particularly the last 10 years when the FAI were sort of sleepwalking towards disaster. And some of the stuff that Mark McSharry, unfortunately, who's made headlines for other reasons, that he's come out with in the last couple of weeks is rewriting history. It's completely rewriting history. He had something last week where he suggested that former board members who ask questions are now being sidelined and can no longer serve in committees. Whatever about referencing old FAI council members who maybe weren't happy with the Delaney years, but they had their reservations privately and they weren't necessarily viewed as being a part of the regime. They still have to accept their their responsibility for not saying very much. But board members, the suggestion that there was these board members who were asking questions, that's just, I don't know who's briefing Mark McSharry, but they are presenting an alternative version of history that, by him putting it out there so strongly, is urging other people to look at it and go, well, this is just clearly the old guard trying to protect their position here, and it's completely clouded the whole debate. But
hasn't Mark McSharry also been in the Dáil for quite a bit of the Delaney era? He's been a public representative.
He's been there for 18 years. Yeah. There's pictures and there's been there's various activity. There's a Noel Kennedy who's been active on social media, who's from the Sligo direction, who has been very active at the Sligo League. And I was looking through the archives. Would have been strongly involved 15, 16 years ago. When there would have been issues and discussions there. Go back a bit further, actually, about McSharry Park, ironically enough, which is related to Mark McSharry's father, Ray, and FAI political in that region. And you have people like Noel Kennedy coming out now on social media who, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, an FAI AGM was standing up and saying that John Delaney was the best signing the FAI had ever made. And now they explain their approach to that year by saying, well, we represented the accounts every year at the AGM and we took the accounts on trust, as though there wasn't commentary and coverage around that time about the FAI finances. That was completely ignored. Whereas now, all of a sudden, they are very, very interested in proper governance and procedures and this and that. But it must be said, there are other people involved in this who aren't necessarily from the old guard as such, who are saying the method with which, Gary Owens, Niall Quinn, Roy Barrett have come to the fore, raises questions. They were previously linked last year in a group called the Visionary Group who put out a pretty uninspiring document. And then the fact that they've all come together into positions of power, I understand that there's a skepticism around that and there's valid questions to be asked. But what I have to say is the concept of 6 independent directors being on a 12-person board, to me, it doesn't really frighten me, because they may be more independent as entities than, like, the language seems to be that it's 6v6, so that the 6 will want one thing and the other 6 will want the other. When surely if you have a vibrant, properly functioning board, you'll have 12 people all operating together. But the language now is very much like it's going to be camps, because that's what we do. And like, that is the old school FAI politics that needs to be taken out of the place. So there's a few things on. There's an emergency council meeting on Friday. I know the FAI are doing some stuff on Wednesday. The Paul Rowan piece today, actually, the detail of it explains how basically Roy Barrett and the new FAI board, the Strong Voices, have got government on side. They've got FIFA on side. They've got UEFA on side. There's a line from an unidentified board member there who basically says that they've been outflanked by the new people in charge of the FAI. And that seems to be a reflection of the fact that the old guard, they've tried to kick up over the last while, but I don't think they're going to have success.
Yeah. Kieran, I might bring you just a couple of pages further forward in the Sunday Times today. I didn't think I'd ever be saying this. Wayne Rooney is giving his prediction and his analysis of Real Madrid against Manchester City, the next leg of their round of 16 tie in the Champions League, where City have a 2-1 advantage, to be played this Friday night in Manchester ahead of this Champions League final tournament from the quarterfinals on. Very unusual end to the Champions League season, but we've got Wayne Rooney's quite interesting opinions on this.
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's been mentioned here on a few different Sundays by different people that he's been an exceptional columnist, and I didn't think it was a huge surprise, because he did an interview with David Winner, I think, for ESPN, maybe, I can't remember how long ago it was, 10, 15 years ago. And the way he thinks about the game and the way he explains the game and the way he played his own game is really fascinating. And it's far more insightful than you often get from players. And, you know, he's carried that into the column, and whoever ghostwrited it as well. I presume it's ghostwritten. But there's a few little things that I wasn't actually aware of. You know, when you look at City, City are routinely talked up as possibly the best team in the world, or one of the best teams. And I've always wondered, you know, but they lost 9 times in the Premier League. You know, keep being told as if it was a poor Premier League. And how could the best team in the world lose 9 times? But Rooney points out they lost every other Big Six club, supposedly Big Six club, beat City last season, and Wolves beat them twice. You know, United beat them 3 times in various competitions. And there's something, and it'll be brought up this week, and it bugs Guardiola more than anything, is that he's never won the Champions League without having Lionel Messi in his team. And he did have an exceptional team at Barcelona, obviously. But he went to Bayern Munich, and even, you know, domestically did really well. But, like, I think Bayern have now won, is it 8 in a row?
8 in a row after this season, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, more often than not, they're going to win anyway. So, but they fell short big time in Europe when he was there, as City have. Like, City, you know, they've yet to get to a final. I think they've been to 1 semi-final. So, for all the money that's been put into them, you know, they still have a lot to prove in terms of Champions League. I think what is interesting what he said about how when Arsenal beat them in the FA Cup, when they beat City, he said, I noticed when City had a goal kick, Arsenal's midfielders went right up against De Bruyne and David Silva, almost man-to-man. And that was clever. It's the first time I've ever seen Ederson at a loss where to pass the ball. Against a team as difficult to control as City, probably the one time you could have an organised press is at goal kicks. And Arsenal exploited that opportunity well. And obviously Arsenal have Mikel Arteta, who was, you know, Guardiola's right-hand man as manager. And, you know, so I think there is a sense that some managers and teams have sussed them out a bit. And it'd be fascinating to see whether that transfers to Europe, you know, whether they will be caught again in Europe. Like, Rooney still sums up that he thinks Atletico or City will win the Champions League. And City are favourites, which I'm still baffled by when you look at how often they've been beaten this season. But I'm really looking forward to these games, because the knockout phase of the Champions League generally throws up fascinating games. and really high quality games. And to have them all coming in such a short space of time could be special.
Yeah, Dan, I think we get an intriguing insight into Rooney the footballer and how he thinks about the game within his column this week too, because he talks about Manchester United knocking Barcelona out in the semi-finals the year before Pep Guardiola took charge, and the way that United deployed themselves that night en route to winning the Champions League. And then he talks about Ferguson's change in approach, where he was setting them out to attack and also leaving themselves wide open in the finals in 2009 and 2011. There's some very interesting little nuggets from Rooney tactically within this article.
Yeah, listen, what you want from a columnist, I mean, the whole function of a columnist and the reason that they get paid well to do it is that they can give insight. You want to learn something. You want to take something from these pages and think, well, this gives me a better understanding of a situation, of what it's like to be on the pitch and involved in these games. And it's not just like a forced opinion or an easy headline or a sort of a generic sort of type of column where you sort of feel like this has been phoned in when he's on the golf course or something. The Rooney column is never that. And like there's actually, you can pick several aspects of it. Like now, as a result, he always generates a headline that's picked up elsewhere. And the story that's coming out of this is that he's been very critical of Alex Ferguson, actually, or been critical of Ferguson, not like over the top, and it's buried in the context of a piece, but I can see why it would be a headline taken elsewhere. Speaking about how in the Champions League finals where Manchester United played against Barcelona, that Ferguson got it tactically all wrong compared to 2008 semi-finals when basically Manchester United swallowed their pride to some degree, as Rooney puts it, and they didn't use that term, but they had to basically cede possession, let Barcelona have possession and just deal with it and absorb it. And he tactically explains, how to deal with the threat of Abidal and Iniesta on the left side, and that would have been part of his brief. And he goes into great detail about how between himself and Michael Carrick and Paul Scholes and Park Ji-sung, they did actually a lot of the running that day, and it was the defenders who didn't, and they kept the shape. But I think he speaks. Was it the Champions League final in? I'm not sure if he specifies which Champions League final it is, because they obviously lost 2 to Barcelona. But he has a specific line that he remembers Alex Ferguson saying, "We're Man United and we're going to attack. It's in the culture of this football club." And Rooney says he was in the dressing room thinking, "I'm not too sure about this. I think all the players knew deep down it was the wrong approach, that we were abandoning the way that brought us success in that 2008 semi-final. And sure enough, both times we got outplayed. There was being true to the club, but then they're sitting back afterwards and thinking, we've lost. For me, it doesn't matter how you do it in these big Champions League games as long as you win." And it is actually unusual to see a very open criticism of Ferguson's tactics. I don't recall too many instances of that, and you could correct me on it, that a lot of the Fergie stuff that's come out is like the dealing with Keane and Stam and various people, how he discarded them and personality clashes. And I know his relationship with Rooney maybe, was not great, particularly towards the end. But he sort of says, listen, that Ferguson had a suicidal approach to these finals against Barcelona, and it cost them. And that to me is good value from a columnist. Yeah. And that's something that many years on, we're getting something from it.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Thursday night football with John Giles.
Johnny Giles is a national treasure. When he speaks, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. When he's on the show, I was in the car the other day, I parked the car and I sprinted into the house and turned on the radio. I love listening to him. I love Johnny Giles.
John Giles, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
If you've just joined us, a very hello this morning, and also a very hello to our podcast listeners. who only get the show from 8 to 10 every morning. We start at 7:30, so you've missed half an hour of some top quality stuff as well. Get on, subscribe, or better still, get up early, listen to us live, watch us recap on YouTube. You can get that in the video section of the OTB app. It's myself and Eoin with you at 8 o'clock this morning all the way through until 10. Eoin, good morning to you. How are you?
Very well, sir. How are things?
Yeah, good. Are you looking forward to being one of 500 who are, it seems, imminently about to be free to go to a GA match, I presume a race meet, go and catch the dogs in Shelbourne Park? All of a sudden 500 seems like, it's not a bad crowd.
It's going to be announced today, isn't it? A couple of stories in the papers, I think, saying that 500 is going to be followed through it. Of course, we were supposed to have this a little while ago.
A leaky government has told several key journalists that this is going to happen. It's on the front page of the newspaper, so if it doesn't happen at this point, you'd expect a fairly sizable backlash. Yeah,
for sure. The backlash has already been pretty sizable at this point. Have people cooled the jets a little bit over the last week when it comes to the GA should allow more people into the grounds? It definitely seems that there's been less big names coming out saying we can definitely do this, because obviously the figures haven't been amazing. But then again, you can look at perhaps community transmission perhaps not being back to where it was, or perhaps not showing the trends, and we might be on the periphery of a second spike on that front at least. So perhaps those people who say that we should have 500 people into GEA grounds will stand by that for the next little while. It does seem that if you're going to try something out with this country at the moment, then an outdoor sporting event and getting more spectators in might be one of the safer ways to do so.
As long as the advice is coming from the medical people and the scientists, then that's fine. That I think we should, at this point, they've done a reasonable job. So you got to say, let's go with it. If somebody's overruling it because of pressure coming from lobby groups, sports bodies, for example, then that's not a great situation. So you've got to assume that we're following the science and we're doing what is correct for everybody. And if that's the case, then that's the next phase, and let's see how it goes.
One of the thoughts I had over the weekend on all of this was, why have we been watching so many sporting events take place over the last few months in empty stadiums? Why are stadiums even being used? Why are we watching the empty Gaelic grounds hosting Na Piarsaigh versus Kilmallock and TG Cahir? Why are we watching Anfield or Goodison Park, as it was for Liverpool versus Everton? Why, when you see what's happening in the NBA, of course it's a bubble and people have to be taken away from their home ground, but this is now solely a television spectacle. The idea of home advantage is gone, and the entertainment that we are being given at home could be enhanced greatly, I feel, by the small setup at a training ground, at a small club ground in the GEA, where you can get your fans in on screens around the place, or it feels like less of a cavern, which is certainly what we've seen in the GEA and the Premier League.
So purpose-built cage with a wall of unbreakable glass.
Something like that.
You could have a live Zoom call to people's gaffs and have the sound turned up. Oh,
well, exactly.
That kind of stuff. Yeah.
What was it? Was it the Pepsi ad that took place in the cage? All the games. It should just become
Nike,
cage
wasn't
football.
it? Wasn't it Nike?
Was it Nike?
Yeah, one of those two. I mean, I think that they probably have both had their own different cages, but I think the original cage was Edgar Davids era Nike, I want to say.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems that this is. I think we've all got used to the sort of hourly experience of this thing, and I mean, if you're going to bring 500 people into a ground and that's the cap, there's no need again to be upgrading these games to big stadiums, or there's no need in the first place for any big stadiums for these games. It's just a small thing, but it's when you look at the product that we're being fed from America, it looks a hell of a lot better when you don't have massive rows of bleachers with nobody sitting there, when the only thing you can see is the bench and then the massive screen with all the supporters. Now, obviously, we're being fed stuff from an indoor facility that is literally a bubble, so that's very, very different to a massive GA ground. But still, the smaller club GA setups, you feel, could perhaps look better, and you're kind of less scratching your head saying, God, the Gaelic grounds really could host this massive fixture here with 1,000 people even.
We're going to have 500 people in grounds in Ireland, so that'll be League of Ireland grounds, it'll be club rugby, it'll presumably be the Aviva for the rugby, which starts in a couple of weeks' time. it's great that Ireland's at the forefront of this experiment of having live fans back, right? We're all very pleased to be at the bleeding edge of this.
Of course, if it goes well, we will be the ones to say, look at us. We told you all how to do it, and we managed to pull it off. Like, I mean, I guess we are in a position where we haven't exactly gone through a process of having to get a professional league back over the line initially. And maybe the UK are looking at things saying to themselves, well, we've managed to pull off the Premier League situation without fans. Why change the good thing that we've managed to do? Or, like, I'm sure there are people within the Premier League who are looking around saying, God, I'm pretty surprised with how that actually went. Like, imagine the backlash had there been even a kind of a medium outbreak within a team, or had there been a noticeable spike as a result of the Premier League returning in a country that was suffering big time from the coronavirus. The backlash would have been incredible. The pressure on them was huge to pull this thing off. And now that it went successfully, there might be a tendency on their part to say, well, let's just do the same thing again and let's not worry about fans for the time being. Now, of course, that will change, and before the end of the year, aren't they saying that they want to have Premier League fans back in ground shortly, at least after the return of the game? Whereas here, there was never that situation. That there wasn't a big professional league that we had to get over the line, and we have still been handcuffed to the national guidelines, the health guidelines. And right now, it is legal to have 200 people at an outdoor gathering, and it seems, according to reports this morning, become legal to have 500 people at an outdoor gathering. So, this is the lead we've been taking, and we've kind of found ourselves in this position.
Stephen Poacher's in the papers today saying that he expects that there will be difficulties in terms of players dropping out after the club season is over and before the intercounty season starts, that some intercounty players might decide that they're not going to go back for the shortened season this year, that they've had enough, and also that from a professional work perspective, that actually the risk from being involved in this while at the same time going to work all the time is something that they might not volunteer for. He says he's spoken with players who are enjoying the extra time that they have at the moment, and that actually maybe we might see another precipitous decline in the numbers taking part. Because initially I thought that actually more people would take part than, you know, people who had been injured. For example, we saw was one of the Down footballers who was on the verge of withdrawing. He rested up his body over the first 3 months of lockdown, came back fit and well, and was like actually quite looking forward to going back and playing a shortened season. Season's over in 2 months. You're in reasonable form after the club anyway. So I hadn't really thought about that. The flip side of that there will be loads of players who decide, I'm not gonna put myself through 8 weeks of hard training for 1/2 championship matches.
No, and perhaps it's a bit more of a surprise that we haven't had more opt-outs as well, or more high-profile opt-outs at this
point. They won't come yet, is the thing, because you don't need to reveal your hand, or maybe people have already opted out, and it's only when the name is on the team sheet that actually, after the parade, if there are maybe parades are banned, I don't know. It's like, well, hang on a second, where is that player? Oh, they opted out 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that happens, all right. But I guess right now there hasn't been any news of that happening. Like, the interesting thing now is that you've got players sitting on their hands who've been knocked out of club championships, who aren't going to be able to train with their county for a long time. Like, was it
45 days? I think
45 days. I saw the number that John Fogarty had this morning from the Waterford Football Championship. So that is quite a wait if you're an intercounty player.
It seems unnecessary, right?
It would have been common sense for the intercounty teams to go back and actually train a bit earlier. But then the flip side of that might have been that more intercounty championships might have mysteriously finished up a hell of a lot earlier than they were meant to, or that their county finals were suddenly pushed forward if intercounty training was allowed before whatever that date was that we were all talking about a few weeks ago. That could have been the unintended consequence of all of that. But yeah, it does seem a bit unnecessary. Time to rest up on a few injuries. There'll definitely be no rustiness as an excuse. It'll definitely be being undercooked rather than overcooked, I would say, when it comes to the Intercounty Championship.
9 minutes past 8 here this morning on OTB, and let's tell you about what's coming up on the show. I'm going to speak with Daniel Harris right now about the very latest situation at Manchester United and the Jadon Sancho transfer. After that, we'll bring you the sports pages and the top stories. We've got our Gillette pressure rankings around about 9 o'clock. At 20 past 9, the Kilkenny legend Eddie Brennan, now the Laois manager. We'll talk to him briefly about the intercounty situation, but really we want to talk to him about the 5 best inside forwards. Tommy had a phrase for it, was 5 foxes. Was that what it was? It was like, I'm not sure we thought that one through, but anyway. And then Deal or No Deal with Steve-O coming your way at 9:40, where we get the best of the transfer tittle tattle and give it a credibility rating. It's 10 out of 10 for the credibility rating of Daniel Harris's knowledge at the moment. Daniel, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How's it going?
You've been way ahead of the Jadon Sancho curve the whole time. I'm not going to, it would be rude as a journalist to ask a fellow journalist your sources, but who are your sources, Daniel? Who are they?
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you or something like that. Is that what people say in these circumstances? I'm not sure. But I guess, because it's not my job to get stories and speculate particularly, it means that I only have to publish the ones that I'm certain about. So, I'd been told through the course of the season that deal would happen provided United got in the Champions League, because the other two clubs who had shown significant interest were Liverpool and Real Madrid, neither of whom had the money or had Sancho as a priority. So once United got in the Champions League, I think because I imagine a lot of the deal had already been discussed, it should, in theory, not take long to actually do the deal. Although United generally do try and drag their feet, it doesn't look like this is going to happen here, because they know what the price of the player is and they've decided they want the player. And actually, I imagine that they see Jadon Sancho as someone quite crucial for them commercially as well. Because if you think back to the dog days of Wayne Rooney towards the end of his career, Rooney was obviously finished as an elite level player, but what would happen would be United would need a player to go and do something for their sponsors. And in those days, basically everyone wanted Rooney, because even though Rooney was finished as a footballer, if you think about the players that Van Gaal had and that Mourinho had, then there weren't very many stars until they signed Pogba. And then, whereas now, if you look at that team, there are a lot of them. So if you're whatever, Mr. Potato Head or Turkish Toilets or whatever it might be, if you were looking at United then, you would always ask for Rooney. Whereas now, you look at United and you think, well, we could have Marcus Rashford, we could have Jadon Sancho if he arrives, Mason Greenwood's going to be a superstar, Paul Pogba, Bruno Fernandes. There's just so many players, and the amount of money that the club is able to make commercially is significantly contingent on the kind of players that they have who are attractive to sponsors, who people want to be associated with. So I would imagine that Jadon Sancho definitely works for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer because he's a high-level player, but I expect it also works quite well for Ed Woodward.
Look, that's really interesting, and obviously that helps grease the wheels, because I was wondering if this was a significant departure from last summer when we saw the opposite, where they were linked with a player, but it dragged on for ages and ages and ages and ages and ages, and eventually they did spend the whole amount of money that Harry Maguire would have cost him at the start of the transfer window, and I just wondered if this was a maturing of the back-end processes.
I think Borussia Dortmund saying it has to be done by now or it's not happening probably has a greater effect on that, because I think back to other times when that happened. It happened with Dimtar Berbatov. United spent the whole summer trying to buy him and trying to get him for less than what they've been told by Daniel Levy the price was, and ended up having to basically steal him from the airport in order to pay the same price. And what you end up with then is you end up sticking Berbatov into the team. He's not settled in Manchester probably. I don't know if that was a problem for him, but the players weren't used to playing with him, and he was quite a different kind of player to the players that had been in that team previously. And it took time, and it never quite worked out with Berbatov, even though he was good, but he wasn't as good as people hoped he was going to be. And I'm sure it wasn't just because he didn't start brilliantly, but it does make a big difference, particularly with strikers and attackers, that it's not the same in every case. Andy Cole is one who took a long time to get going, but mainly the ones that have succeeded, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Ronaldo, Dwight York, turned it on pretty much from the beginning. And part of that is the ability to get used to playing with the players if you can. And I think that Sancho is a different kind of right winger to the one United have had, mainly because they haven't had one really, a proper one, since Nani left. And they've got settled now playing with Mason Greenwood on the right, and he's really a wide attacker. He's looking to get to goal as fast as he can. And Sancho is something different, and the players are going to need to make different runs for Sancho because he likes to hang on to the ball a little bit longer than Greenwood, who is trying to get a shot off more or less. And he's trickier than Greenwood, and he's more likely to go on the outside than Greenwood. And getting used to where you need to be takes time.
Daniel, what do a club like Manchester United look at in terms of commercial attractiveness in a player like Jadon Sancho, other than the fact that he's unbelievably good at football?
I think that is a big part of it, being unbelievably good at football. Because if you look at someone like Messi, who is unbelievably good at football, doesn't seem like a particularly interesting personality, I doubt he is wanting for sponsorship deals. I'm sure that is absolutely fine. So being good at football will always be the main thing. I think what you're also looking for, though, is competitive charisma. Players who play with swagger, who play with intensity, who are entertaining to watch and fun to watch. And I also think increasingly you want highlights reel players, because that is how people are starting to consume football, and definitely how younger people are starting to consume football. Not all of them, but there are plenty of people, and hundreds of thousands and probably millions of people, who will watch the best bits of a game rather than the entire game. So when you watch the best bits of a game, who is going to be active in those best bits? And Jadon Sancho is exactly that kind of player, because he's extremely skillful and he's a lot of fun to watch, and he plays with a lot of joy. And that is the kind of thing that people want as much of as possible. And so I think it's more like that. Same with Paul Pogba. He's great to watch when he's on form. He doesn't mess about with. What was I going to say? How would I phrase this with Paul Pogba? The things of which he is capable are stupendous, and because of that, you keep your eyes on him. And I think that even when he doesn't produce, there's always the prospect that he might. And I think that is the kind of thing that excites people.
OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're talking with Daniel Harris about the situation at Manchester United and the signing of Jadon Sancho. Is spending this money on Jadon Sancho this early in the transfer window a sign that there is more business to be done, or is this the end of the business? I
doubt this is the end of the business. I'm not sure how much there will be done after that. I guess as a United supporter, I was hoping for 3 players. I felt like they were always going to sign Sancho. And now, assuming that happens, I'd be hoping for a centre-back and a midfield player to play with Pogba and Fernandes. I would expect them to get a centre-back. Whether they can stretch to a midfield player, I don't know. It might depend on sales. It's possible also that they might decide that they'd prefer to sign another striker than a midfield player. To me, that would be a mistake. I don't think Sancho will be it, but I don't think they'll be spending that sort of money on someone else. It probably depends a bit on who they sell to. So they've got Sanchez off the wage bill, which is good, but the deal that they thought they were doing with Roma for Smalling seems to have fallen through. Perhaps someone else will buy Smalling. Someone else should buy Smalling. Smalling's a good player. And I'm surprised that Roma haven't found the money, because when you have a player who's doing well for you, it seems silly to say, we don't want more of that, we'll try and find someone else. But I think that they will sign centre-back. I don't know if the stories about them talking to Gabriel are true. They seem to be quite well sourced, and there seem to be quite a lot of them. And United are looking for a left-sided centre-back, so I'd say there's a fair chance that's happening. I've been told that Upamecano was at the top of their list, but he signed for Leipzig, so they're not buying him. So I think that what will end up happening is whoever the centre-back is, it will be a punt, in a way that Eric Bailly was a punt and Victor Lindelof was a punt, because there are players who cost a kind of middling range of money where you hope that the player will work, but you don't look too stupid if they don't. And I think part of the reason for that is just that if someone gave you unlimited amount of money to go and buy a centre-back, who would you buy? And you can't get Virgil van Dijk out of Liverpool. And after him, there aren't that many players who are obviously excellent, who you know will be good enough to play at the top level. It's just, I think one of the reasons why people get so carnally excited about Van Dijk is just aren't very many good centre-backs around at the moment. And so finding a centre-back, you're never quite sure, because it's not as much about obvious talent as playing in a lot of other positions, like Jadon Sancho. You look at him play, okay, I get it. You can see it, and he's done it in the German league, and it seems unlikely that English fullbacks are going to be so much better that they're going to stop him doing it in England. Whereas if you play centre-back, what the demands in England are slightly different, but also it takes time to mature as a centre-back. You tend not to see players in their teens, in their early 20s, being good enough to play centre-back at the top level. Even Rio Ferdinand, who is a natural defender and a natural footballer, he didn't get really good till he was sort of 23, 24. And that's what you need from centre-back, and particularly if it's a centre-back who's getting used to playing a slightly higher standard of football. And so if you sign someone from Ligue 1, then they might be a good player, but ultimately the standard is not as high as it is in the Premier League. And although the standard is not uniformly high in the Premier League, the top 2 English clubs are amongst the best clubs in the world, if not the best clubs in the world. And every player in the English League, pretty much, every team in the English League has at least one player that can really hurt you, one player of proper class, and some have more. So the ability of someone to step up, and then the ability also of someone to cope with the pressure of playing every game when you're expected to win, and also to play games where you might not see very much of the ball, so you need to keep focused, is a different skill from commandeering regular rearguards where you're just chucking yourself in front of things. So I think that whichever centre-back it is will be some kind of speculation, and probably for not that much money, because there just isn't, which centre-back would you go and pay 80 million quid for?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is there any chance that Smalling comes back to the club and wins a position in the team?
Unlikely, I think, because once a decision has been made of that sort, it's unlikely that decision will get changed. As it happens, I think Smalling is a better defender than Lindelof. He's certainly more physical and better in a rear guard. He's not as good on the ball as Lindelof, but Lindelof isn't so good on the ball that you say that is more important than being able to defend. I think that he probably matches Maguire better because he's got recovery pace, so he can be covered in a way that Maguire can't. I think that is probably one of the reasons United want a left-sided centre-back, because if United get a left-sided centre-back, then it means Maguire can play on the right. And it means that you will have, let's assume that the centre-back that they buy has that recovery pace. Then you've got Maguire on the other side. He's playing as a right centre-back. You've got Wan-Bissaka covering him, and he also has legs and pace. And at the moment, Maguire's playing on the left. So if someone gets in behind him, then Luke Shaw might have to cover. And Luke Shaw doesn't have the kind of recovery pace that Wan-Bissaka has. So I doubt it will be Smalling, but I absolutely think that Smalling is better than Lindelof.
Okay. Just to go back to the signing of Sancho, who's losing out, or how does this work? Is it actually no one loses out and they all play the same number of games, or is there now a first choice front 3 and Greenwood is back to being relief because he's still very young, and so you're not going to play him 60 games next season because it's too soon, too early for him?
No, I don't think it will be like that. I think that the team, the likelihood is that Sancho will play most of the big games on the right. But otherwise, then you've got Martial and Greenwood competing to play centre forwards. And you've also got the Champions League. So in the UEFA Cup this season, United were able to basically change most of the players because the teams that you play in the groups of the UEFA are so crap that you would expect to beat them whatever happens. In Champions League, that's not going to happen. So you're playing weekend, midweek. And as Fergie always said, there's plenty of games to go around. So it'll get to some big games, and I guess some players will be disappointed, but I doubt that it will always be Sancho, Martial, Rashford in every big game because Greenwood's too good. And I kind of always assume that eventually Greenwood will be too good not to just play at centre forward the whole time, except Martial looks like he's made that last step where he's actually now a serious player. So what we saw at the end of the season was that United's front 3 and Bruno Fernandes were exhausted. And you need to make sure that doesn't happen. And the way you make sure that doesn't happen is by making changes, because Ole knew that he needed to win most of the post-lockdown games to get in the top 4. And what he found was that when it came to it, he didn't trust almost anything that he had on the bench. So even when you've got Rashford blowing out his arse or just not playing particularly well, because he didn't play well in the last couple of games, Solskjaer didn't want to bring on Mata or Ighalo or Lingard, and with good reason. Whereas now you've always got, assuming everyone's fit, you've always got at least one change that will seriously give the opposition something different to think about. Because it's not just about having numbers, but it's about having different options. And so if you've got to spend 75 minutes facing Jadon Sancho, who's trying to go on the outside, and then for the last 15 or the last 20, you've got to face Mason Greenwood, that's going to ask you a very different question, and vice versa. Or if you bring Greenwood on up front instead of Martial or with Martial, then all of a sudden there are 2 centre-forwards there. And it's often options that are the most important thing to take advantage of tired defenders. where suddenly they've got to do something different, but they've been defending the box for almost an hour and a half, and the minds are tired and the legs are tired, and you need that variety so that the opposition have to think about something different, they have to do something different, and they might not be capable. And you also need weight and numbers, which can also in the end make a difference, where there's just so many strikers on the pitch that when the ball goes in the box, there aren't enough defenders to pick them up, or no one knows who's meant to be picking up who, and that's also really important. So I had previously thought that I would sign a midfield player and a centre back, and then deal with someone signing a winger subsequent to that. But actually, I think that United are probably unlikely to win the league next season. So signing a player as good as Sancho, who will make a significant attacking difference, is probably the right move, actually.
Is the sense, Daniel, that everybody will be happy with that arrangement up front? Because it does seem that there have been positive sounds on that front, with Marcus Rashford at the start of the season just gone, being pretty happy to be shunted out to the left to get the best out of Martial through the middle. That does bode well for adding another player into that party.
Yeah, I think Rashford's found his position. I think Martial's found his position, and for that, players deserve credit because they've taken to it. But I think Solskjaer deserves a lot of credit as well, because what he did with Martial was he started to take away his excuses. Because the thing with Martial was he's an excellent finisher, but he didn't have the intensity or the inclination to get into positions to score enough goals enough of the time. So he would kind of linger on the left wing, and he would try and receive the ball standing still. And then if the ball came across from the other side or someone shot, he would most of the time not be chasing in at the back post. So what Solskjaer did was he put him in the middle because he's a good finisher, because he holds the ball up better than Rashford as well. And it's worked really well. Like, his collection of goals this season is remarkably good. And if he starts, and there's still improvements, if he starts scoring a few more tap-ins, then you're talking about someone who won't score 20 goals, score 30 goals. And he looks now like an all-round striker, and he looks like he's making the right runs. Because even at the beginning, when Van Gaal signed him, he played up front for a lot of the first season. He didn't make a centre-forwards runs. He scored goals because he was really talented. But what he's doing now is his positioning is better, his hold-up play is better, the runs that he's making are better. And in fairness, the players around him are a whole lot better, and the team's a whole lot better, and the manager's better. So all of those other things are contributing as well. So I think that him and Rashford have both found their positions. And what we've seen with Rashford, particularly after lockdown, is that he perhaps spending a little bit too much time playing really wide. But I think that's partly because United are trying to get Greenwood as close to goal as possible, and they don't want a man on each touchline and someone in the middle, because you need a little bit of connectivity between the team. But what we're seeing from Rashford post-lockdown is he's a really excellent passer, and he's almost sometimes a second playmaker after Bruno. And then he's built a nice partnership with Luke Shaw, who's overlapping him and underlapping him. Basically, it's just starting to work like a team's meant to. And that's not something we've said about United for a while, and it feels almost strange to watch it, strange to say it. And there's still a lot of work to do before they get to the level that they need to be. But when a team starts to develop, you can see the partnerships developing in different areas of the pitch. You can see the patterns of play that look familiar. You can see the runs where the players know where the other players are going to be. And we are seeing all of that from United. The question now is, will the board back Ole to take them to the next level? And has Ole got what it takes to reach the next level? Because ultimately, the standards are high. You've got to be as good as Klopp and Guardiola. And if you're not as good as Klopp and Guardiola, then you can still be a really good manager. But in order to win the big pots, that's what's going to have to happen. And that's a very high standard indeed.
Yeah, if you're not as good as them, you need better players and a better collection of players coming through. And, there's no evidence that they have that just yet. So last question for you then. Is it more or less likely that they get Grealish and or somebody at that level where there's another 60 to, I don't know, maybe it's 50 to 70 million transfer now that the Sancho deal looks like it's on the verge of being done? So essentially, is Jack Grealish off the table at the moment?
I don't think he's necessarily off the table. I doubt they'd pay 80 million quid for him because he's a player. I mean, they do need another attacking midfield player, because if Bruno gets injured, then the midfield is basically, well, it'll be Matic, Pogba, and then McTominay or Fred, which is solid, but it's not as good at picking people apart. I think that the fact that they've now got Sancho is also, he's another playmaker, effectively. He's not he's not a wide attacker like Greenwood or like, say, Mohamed Salah or Mane, who are mainly there to score goals, to come from wide and to get into the box, and that'd be harder to pick up that way. He will score goals, but he's also there to create goals and to play make. So they do have a bit more leeway in that area. I think, I mean, I don't know, but I wouldn't be paying 80 million quid for Jack Grealish when I could have a Donny van Beek for about half of that, because Van de Beek is a slightly different player to Grealish. Grealish ultimately is a playmaker and scorer. He's there. He's spent half the season playing on the left wing. I think he's excellent. I think he's got the right mentality to play for United, although he'll probably need to curtail some of his off-field indulgences. But I think that Van de Beek is more an all-round midfield player. Like, you wouldn't have to play him in attacking midfield. You could play him in some games. You could play him in front of the back four. In other games, you could play him slightly further forward. And that is more the kind of midfield player that I think United need, rather than someone who, like Grealish, who ultimately he's just an alternative to Bruno Fernandes. Although United do need one, I think they have other significant needs before that.
You'd also be paying the English tax, where it's an English qualified player signed for Manchester United.
Exactly. And I mean, the advantage of signing someone like Grealish is you know that he can do it in the Premier League, because we've seen. And the thing for me with Grealish is the positions that he plays are not areas that I think are the most important for United. And that's not because I don't think United need another attacking midfield player, because we saw at the end of the season that they do. But as I said, they've kind of addressed that with Sancho, because he can take on some of the playmaking duties. And suddenly with Sancho, you look at United, and if you're in opposition, you think, who do we mark? Because when Bruno Fernandes signed and Pogba was injured, other teams could think, in theory, well, if you double up on Fernandes, if you stop Fernandes, you more or less stop United. And that isn't the case anymore. So I think that with Sancho as well, I definitely wouldn't go for Grealish before I went for a midfield player who could play deeper, and I went for a centre-back, and I'd probably sign a left-back. I definitely would at least think about signing a left-back before I sign Grealish as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Daniel Harris, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million.
See you again, lads. Have a good day.
It's 8:31, nearly 8:32 this morning here on OTB AM. Competition time. The Nike Football 2021 Liverpool FC home kit features a vibrant red, traditional white and teal colourway, taking inspiration from the traditional LFC crest and the Liver birds that overlook the city on the iconic Liver building. The new kit is available to pre-order in-store and online right now. And every morning this week on OTB AM, we're giving you the chance to win a €100 voucher for the Liverpool store in the ILAC Centre in Henry Street in Dublin. There are 3 ways of entering the competition this morning to be on the chance of winning. Share the show where you're watching and tag @OffTheBall on Twitter. Just retweet this morning's OTB AM and tag @OffTheBall. Or better still, WhatsApp us a screen grab of how you're watching or listening to the show. That's 087 9 180 180. Time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
So we're going to start with otbsports.com. Here's what's on our own website for you. Manchester United in advanced talks over a record 100 million bid for Jadon Sancho. This would make him the most expensive English footballer in history. The brief this morning: Lancaster for the Lions, Championship playoff and Ryan's disappointment. So James Ryan out for 12 weeks. Stuart Lancaster being linked with a coaching role on the Lions from Warren Gatland. Derry City to remember late John Hume with minutes silence ahead of their next game. And James Ryan a doubt for Ireland's final Six Nations games. It looks like he's more than likely out for those after shoulder surgery. Let's bring you through the sports pages here. We can start with the Irish Independent. And their back page is travel issues cast out over Kenny's Irish bow. This is the game in Bulgaria, which now is a significant doubt given the surge in COVID-19 cases there. That is a minute's silence. Derry City players observing a minute's silence in tribute to the late John Hume before last night's 2-0 victory over St Pat's at Richmond Park. Crowds of 500 set to boost GAA and soccer games, and United closing in on Sancho deal. Their front page headline is wedding limits to stay as GAA gets go-ahead for bigger crowds. So it's obviously not just the GAA, it's going to be the League of Ireland games as well. And when is the actual date? I'm just looking for it there. It's in the next phase. I don't actually see a specific date about when we're going to be allowed those, but you would assume it's sooner rather than later if the rules are coming in. Quinn signals benefits of FAI change. So Niall Quinn was doing media ahead of Virgin Media Sports Festival of Football, which is basically football every night from European games from now until the end of the Champions League final. And he's also been talking about a big week for the FAI. The council meeting is next week, and there's going to be, this week rather, and there's going to be a debate about the memorandum of understanding. It's quite boring, but it's whether or not there should be 4 or 6 independent directors. The FAI have already agreed that there should be 6. There are rumblings of discontent from the various footballing constituencies who think that this is handing over the crown jewels of the FAI, and then also a picture of Jadon Sancho there as well. So that's the Irish Times for you this morning. The Examiner are leading with the playoff final tonight. It's obviously Bournemouth against Fulham. Big stage for the Prince of Denmark. The Premier League has said goodbye to 3 relegated managers, but after tonight's championship playoff, the richest game in football, we'll know the identity of the third replacement who will join Bielsa and Slaven Bilic. And it's Thomas Frank, who has promised to have a pint in each pub in Griffin Park if Brentford are promoted to the Premier League tonight. So that's the story about him. And then Quinn stands firm on a number of independents for FAI board. That is the debate for the hearts and minds within the FAI. The Herald this morning, their back page is Ireland ties up in the air. Quinn admits Nations League games a doubt. And that's the goals from Derry City last night as well. Rory, I've no major worry. McIlroy gears up for USPGA. A low-key build-up to the USPGA this week. Crowds of 500 poised for matches. Headline of the day is wedding crashers, though. Government to rule out increase in 50 guest limit at ceremonies. 6 days to get Sancho is the back page of the Star this morning. Jadon deadline leaves Ole and United in a sweat over Swoop. That's their take on the headline there. Kenny's first game in doubt. A picture of John Hume, the town he loves so well. Hume's passion for Derry City. Jay Dunn. This is the Sun's headline. 70 million rising to British record, 110 million pounds sterling deal, 5 years, 220 grand a week, which is about half of what Alexis Sanchez was getting. So good business for Manchester United to try and reel those wages back in. And it's Scotty Parker who's the other manager for the game tonight against Brentford. Scott Parker is praying he can fulfil his dying ambition of leading Fulham back to the Premier League tonight. Obviously, he's not dying, he's fine. It's just the way that they've written that. And keeping it Quinn check. Niall Quinn admits everything is still up in the air ahead of the Stephen Kenny era getting underway. Quite a lot of balls in the air for the FAI to be juggling at the moment. They're fighting wars on many different fronts, and in the middle of it, the global pandemic is making it hard for them to plan games and whether or not they're going to have players quarantining, etc. Sophia Switch, Bulgaria game in doubt over COVID-19 fears. And Twisted Sisters stage fright at Nace. This is a picture that's on the back page of many of the papers. Sister Lola tries to escape from jockey Ben Cohen at Nace yesterday. The horse rising up. And Leinster Loch Ryan is ruled out for 12 weeks, so not great news for Ireland's prospects in the Six Nations. Police stopped me all the time last week. They even sent a riot van. This is Danny Rose, Spurs ace despairs, what can I do? Danny Rose harassed in his hometown. Jadon Sancho, £100 million man, and Dread Bull, is that the tab of the morning to you? Kenny debut could be on move from Sofia. Endemic race issue within English hockey is the back page on the Guardian this morning. And there's a 12-year-old skateboarder. It was shocking and scary. Dad didn't want to show me the video. Skateboarder Sky Brown, age 12, on her crash and the Tokyo Olympics. 12 seems a little bit too young to be sending somebody to the Olympics. That's just my opinion. United closing in a record 90 million Sancho transfer. A lot of people suggesting that deal is done. The London Times, back page there. United closing in £108 million Sancho deal. Chelsea push 5 subs rule. This is the other debate that's happening in football at the moment. The smaller squads don't want that to happen. And then Sanchez exit paves way for Sancho deal. That's the other thing that's a little bit up in the air about whether or not Alexis Sanchez is actually gone, because Antonio Conte came out and basically abused the board at Inter, despite the fact they've just finished second, first time in 9 seasons that they finished second, and they think that he might be on his way out. The Racing Post, bets that changed history. There's a picture of Barney Curley on the top, who didn't make the Fermanagh Mount Rushmore, and reading the stuff today in the Racing Post, I think maybe he should have. 5-part series begins with the Barney Curley gamble that transformed the bookmaking industry forever. And then Tony McCoy saying, let's hope we don't take these risks again. McCoy's relief after ITV secures new deal. It looks like racing is going to be on terrestrial TV in the UK for the next 3 years at least, up until the end of 2023, in a rights deal that has increased the fee from £7.5 million to £9 million sterling. So it looks like ITV are going to have plenty on telly for free. Oh, what are you starting with?
Will we start with the rugby story that came out yesterday? Warren Gatland on the Will Greenwood podcast talking for the first time really about who he's going to go for in his backroom team for the Lions tour next year. It's always as interesting a political story as the squad is itself. Who is the head coach picking as the people he wants to get on with, the people he decides are the best coaches after himself in the Northern Hemisphere or in Britain and Ireland. And Stuart Lancaster is the name that has come up. So he kind of spoke about the huge amount of respect he has for him. Didn't really overcommit because there is an added complication with trying to get Stuart Lancaster to commit to a summer tour in that he's not a test coach. I mean, it's the international window doesn't suddenly stop for the Lions. There is a pre-season for Leinster that might overlap with the latter end of the Lions tour. So he's not committing fully, but he made it clear in no uncertain terms that he would be interested in Stuart Lancaster coming along on the Lions tour, which is interesting. And it's interesting that he is the coach within the Irish setup that gets mentioned before everybody else. I think there's an argument to be made that he is the best coach that we have on this island at the moment. And it's also interesting as well when you think about what that might do for some of the Irish talents that like we expect to not really be involved in the starting 15 for the test at least next summer. Like we saw Brian O'Driscoll's team, if you were to pick it 2 weeks ago, and what was it, two Irish players, James Ryan and Tadhg Furlong? Yeah. If Lancaster was in there, is there a few more? Like, I often wonder as well, so, like, have we sort of forgotten a lot of things over the last few months? Have we forgotten how good Leinster were over the last few months? Because the last bit of rugby we had was Six Nations, and it's like, oh, that England game, that wasn't great. But there are two different stories to Irish rugby in the mainstream, at least. There is the Test rugby, which hasn't had an amazing 2020 except for the Wales game. Then there is the provincial rugby and Leinster and how brilliant they have been. So you bring Stuart Lancaster into the Lions setup, are we suddenly going to see a far more of an Irish influence in that Lions tour?
Yeah, look, the backroom teams of the Lions was always something you were just always a little bit worried about, where all this, we're all going to just tell everybody how everything is done and share all our information, and it's great. And the players all want that because they want to be part of a winning Lions tour. But from a coaching perspective, you were always giving away all of your intellectual property. You were always telling everybody how you do stuff. Like, if you remember back, famously, O'Connell picked the brains of his rivals about tackle technique and all sorts of stuff, and came away and went like, well, now I know that. Now, obviously, he had to give some information as well. So you just wonder, like, especially if you're the French, or if you're one of the English players and none of the English coaches are there, well, that's not a bad scenario, is it? So, Stuart, you know the way your club team has killed us on the following, how did you do that? And he's not going to not say, because he's trying to win. It's like, it's a give,
Are you saying that Leinster should just step on in there right now and say, Stuart,
I don't think they can. I think that would just be completely unfair. But I would like for him to come up with an entirely new thing that would be like just for the Lions and just for South Africa. For example, so they've all had the current Ireland head coach teach them defence over the last couple of tours, right? That's a good thing to have in your. So this is exactly what he's telling his team this week before Ireland play England. The English players all I get. So on the last Lions tour, this is how they were going to defend in the following scenarios. That's not bad information to have, is it?
No, it's really good information to have, and it's definitely a competitive advantage if you can use it to your advantage. I'm sure Stuart Lancaster is somebody who would be, I guess, smart enough to keep his cards close to his chest when it comes to the Leinster moves. And it's a vastly different team. I wonder if it actually is a situation where you are walking on eggshells a little bit when it comes to tactics as a coach.
I don't think you can. You won't win because you're going up against the world champions. So you've got to be you've got to try and slit their throat in every facet of the game. It's like it is pure competition in this tiny little period of time. So you don't have the opportunity to pretend that I'm going to keep this back just in case. This is our game plan. And look, maybe rugby is so well analysed at this point that there are no secrets, that it's just about who on the day actually does the plan the best and who wins the fight. And maybe I'm overcomplicating this a little bit in that, we're going to defend the way we always defend, we're going to attack the way we always attack, just do it well, do it better than the opposition.
And like, I wonder if we don't give the coaches of the Lions enough credit for how they negotiate that and navigate that, because you talk about what can you give away in modern rugby if everybody knows it. Well, line-out calls is one thing, I suspect, that if you knew the opposition's line-out calls, that'd be a huge benefit to have. But that'd be a really stupid thing to give away. So you obviously come up, I presume, with new line-out calls for every Lions tour. Am I right or wrong in saying that?
I don't know. I would hope that you're right. That I would definitely hope that you're right. It's actually less of a worry this time now that Gatland isn't the Wales coach. But for the last number of times where Gatland was like, yeah, I'm going to have you and you and you. And then for the 4 years in between, he's just like, well, listen, I mean, I've been in selection meetings with this guy and I know they're going to pick this and I know they're going to do this and I know they're going to do this. It was definitely an advantage for Gatland in the Six Nations.
Are you saying it was a Trojan horse, except the Trojan horse was not a horse at all? It was actually just a wooden structure of a Trojan warrior. Very, very obvious.
It was a lion. It was a lion shaped. It was that cuddly toy that this most alpha of males has to carry out onto the pitch before going to face the All Blacks. Like, really? You've given him a teddy bear to go out and face the... Not sure that shield is going to work, buddy. I think you might want an actual shield.
Yeah, well, that is the good news. It isn't the All Blacks. Like, world champions, still, it's not the All Blacks.
Yeah, and sure, half the team will have been absolutely exhausted from earning their money around the world in Europe in the year in between.
They better be tapping up information from the likes of Sneeman and Dale Andy now at Munster and start drip feeding it back to Stuart Lancaster and Leinster, who can drip feed it back to Warren Gatland as Lions head coach, and that is our way of getting around them. You know, everybody knows everybody in rugby these days, it turns out.
The cost of globalisation is that it's much easier to do business. What's next?
David Beckham is next. It's not one of the stories you'll see on the back pages this morning, but something that's come up on, I think it was the Irish Sun, reporting it, that he is reportedly in talks with streaming services to develop a film about his life. So David Beckham was watching The Last Dance earlier this year, was pretty inspired by all accounts, and he is reportedly now producing a series on his life after football. He's got his own television firm, so that's not really an issue. That launched last year, Studio 99, you might have heard about, and where it is going to be broadcast, he's already in talks with Amazon and Netflix. As I say, it's going to be about the post-football life of David Beckham rather than the football life of David Beckham. And I'm not quite sure if that's actually what we all want to see. Like, we want to see a bit of that, but we also want to see David Beckham in his pomp and the cultural impact he had. Like, this footage does not exist, but if you're going to be inspired by The Last Dance, is it not a situation where you want to be inspired by the insight you got to the most explosive time in your athletic career? But apparently that's not going to be the case. Like, it does sort of scream self-advertising when you're not going to focus on your football career, because I guess some of the hardest stories he has to tell are about his football career, about the 1998 World Cup, the abuse he suffered at the hands of rival fans at the start of the next season, and how he managed to navigate his way to being one of the best players in the world that immediate season after getting sent off in the World Cup, and became a national icon of disgrace in the views of some people. Like, that is a story. That is a story of redemption in David Beckham's eyes, and that's the one I want to see.
Yeah, I mean, the Sun burned an effigy of David Beckham, and they had his face on a dartboard in the aftermath of that World Cup. And to go from that, to be honest, like, the post-career Beckham is not something that I'm going to watch 10 episodes of. No thanks. But I probably would watch a 6 to 8 part series of, like, what happened at that point. Ferguson kicking the boot, you don't have footage of it, but you've got eyewitness accounts of 5 or 6 people in the room. Probably at this point you get Ferguson to say, yeah, kick the boot, I shouldn't have done it. Or, yeah, kick the boot, he probably deserved it. And then he went out and he had the like little stitches on the thing. They weren't even stitches. They were just little bits. I mean, at that point I knew he was gone. Like, there's definitely, at this point there is the remove of distance where everybody can start to tell the truth about what they felt like. And that Manchester United team, I think, for all of the self-mythologizing the class of 92 have done, that's been the only story that's been told about that group. Like, they cornered the market very early. You still have the Roy Keane story. You've still got a proper Cantona story to be told, like, with good footage and him going and telling the truth about it, which I think is going to be pretty interesting.
It's just a shame that nobody had the idea to kind of play the ESPN card and say, we will come and sit in your dressing room for a while or leave a microphone in there and we will burn the footage if anything bad happens. But actually, you go out and you win a treble and we would like to broadcast that down the line. But I think that was just kind of a mad coincidence on the Jordan side of things, really, wasn't it? But
well, I don't know. Why? I don't know. Because did being Liverpool and the envelopes and Brendan Rodgers, did that ruin that happening in football properly for a long period of time?
I think there will be a greater suspicion in football than there would be in American sports, wouldn't there? The idea of giving insider content would kind of seem a little bit like treachery, I would have thought. It's kind of like one step between the American sports and the GEA, for example. It's like the next step down.
The paranoia of the GEA stuff when those managers go. Is it because that there's that great tactic of lumping it into the full forward that the opposition might not know about until actually, you unfurl the 7'14" sub who has just been. I don't understand. I really don't know if the information is so bad coming through. Anyway, when is this Beckham thing is going to happen in the next 18 months? So we should prepare ourselves.
Yeah, but as you say, what is the thing that we want to see from his post-football life, which is the entire premise for this? Are we that interested in Inter Miami? Are we that interested in how he has gone to the next level, independent of football entirely? I'm not so sure if many people would be that interested in that. The thing about some of these things, especially when it comes to Jordan, and he's making these comparisons himself, is how he was a magnet for other incredible characters. And all the other incredible characters that we want to hear about are other footballers or managers and people that David Beckham played alongside or played for. They're the people we want to hear about. They're the people that he associated himself with, not even by design, that he was forced into teams with. That, when teammates don't get along, is one of the more fascinating narratives that exists in every dressing room. And if this is going to be just a picture of his post-football life, then it's going to be a little bit disappointing, which is a shame because I still think that the footballing life of David Beckham could be something that would be really special.
Well, you've got the football careers, the England stuff, there's the Man United stuff, and then there's the Galacticos, which is genuinely interesting. Being somebody who helped conquer America is also interesting as a postscript, I think, that you could do in half an hour. And he ends up with a football club, and that's a fairly amazing achievement to be a part owner of that. I wonder what percentage he has of that. But anyway, look, we'll hear more from that, no doubt. 8:52 here this morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. What's next?
Just one last one very quick one, kind of sticking with sports entertainment. A big couple of days for The Rock. Dwayne Johnson has bought the XFL. Have you seen this story, first of all?
I saw a headline. I didn't click on it. I'm not going to lie.
Did you see the figure that he bought it for?
€1, $1. What was it?
$15 million.
15 million.
To buy a professional sports league with a relatively high profile. Is that not an unbelievable piece of business by The Rock here? He's not the sole person who's bought it. His ex-wife has also come in, and a private investment firm have come in to buy it as well. It's obviously been what a great, if everybody got a divorce and was on that good terms with their wife, then the world would be probably a much better place. It's incredible, really, they've managed to do this. So obviously a complete disaster this year. The XFL comes back after, I can't remember how long the hiatus was, and COVID kills it. It wasn't doing that well before the pandemic, but COVID does absolutely kill it. So that's why the situation is where it is, that you can get it for 15 million quid. The Rock is a former footballer who played in the Canadian Football League, which most people know. So he's got the perfect Venn diagram to be the person who owns something like the XFL. He's probably a bit more of a palatable character than Vince McMahon. This thing has a chance because it's people knocking lumps out of each other. Knocking lumps out of each other's cells.
Did you know The Rock broke the news that Osama bin Laden had been killed?
I did not know that.
So he tweeted 3.5 hours before Obama went public with it. Unbelievably proud to be an American right now. Massive news coming. Can't reveal anymore. ... And it was about Osama bin Laden because apparently he's mates with some of the special forces because they all hang out and they do special force things. And he obviously pays for their dinner, unlike Tiger Woods. So they give him the good stuff and they give him the information that we've just got Osama. It's
right.
The Rock's a fairly interesting character to have created the billion-dollar enterprise around his own brand that he's managed to do off the back of being a wrestler. So anyway, look, I don't know what you get for your $15 million. I think you just get the right to use the XFL because it's not like they have property or any clubs that still exist, because obviously the whole thing went, as you said, tits up a little bit earlier this year. Right, is that it from those stories from today? Okay. What are we at? 8:55 this morning. Let's check out the very latest on the OTB Sports app for you. To download for free, just search for OTB Sports in the App Store. The app opens on a personalised home feed. You get to pick whatever you want. You can change it depending on time of the year or whatever it is. You can listen to OTB AM on our sports radio station called OTB Sports Radio. Just hit the listen button. It's essentially one click. And there is a continuous feed of all of our best material and all our live shows. It's active all day long with top quality sports content. Check out the video section. All of our best videos are there. And you can watch the video of this show and you can watch the video of everything that we do from studio as well, including some of our best old content. And then, of course, there's the OTB Podcast Network, which is the busiest and best podcast network in the country, with millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of listens over the last number of months. So get on board and so hit the subscribe button on all your favourite podcast feeds, and we'll be in your earballs all day long. So what are we at? 8:55, 8:56 this Tuesday morning. Packed hour coming up for you in the next hour. Eddie Brennan joins us around about 9:15. We've got the Gillette pressure rankings. There's also Deal or No Deal. Going to be back in a moment. Keep an eye out in the ad break for our next guest on the latest episode of Andy Lee Meets.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.
Salah takes a shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season. 25 yards out.
If you throw your lot in and play senior international football with somebody, that should be the end of it.
That's brilliant. Oh, my goodness me. You will not see a better try.
Who will be All-Ireland champions? Who will see their dreams turn into reality? Whose names will be etched in history forever?
OTB Live. Never miss the action right here. Every Saturday and Sunday on Off the Ball.
And then I'm walking in there, you know, I've only been coaching 6 months and I'm going to have to train and take the session. And you do have those doubts. Like, I wondered, did you ever have those, like, coming from the underage team, going to the senior international team, working with those players now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who says they don't have doubts about themselves are probably lying a bit.
OTB Sports in your pocket. Listen to OTB Sports Radio 24/7.
Until that habit is broken, do you not realise how crazy those things were?
Watch your favourite OTB videos.
The benefit of being suspended, me and Scoresy were out every night, a couple of nights before the game.
Read all the latest sports news and opinions, all in one place, the OTB Sports app. Listen, watch, read. Wherever you are, we're always with you. The OTB Sports app, available to download now from your app store.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Just a little snippet there in the ad break of the latest episode of Andy Lee Meets. It was Brian Kerr he was talking to there in the ad break. That full episode is being released this Thursday across all of our channels on OTB Sports. It's all thanks to SEAT. You can check out episode 1 with Mickey Rourke, well worth your while. Episode 2 with Gary Jarman, lead singer on the basis of the Cribs, is available right now on the podcast network. And as I said, episode 3 will be Brian Kerr, and it will be released this Thursday across all of the OTB Sports channels. Now, time for the Gillette pressure rankings.
For me, it was a self-imposed pressure.
Was I under pressure? No.
Yeah, they're under pressure. Everyone's under pressure.
OTB AM's pressure rankings with Gillette.
And the big pressure.
It is a time in global history, Eoin, where so many people have been under so much pressure. Normally we have a top 3. We couldn't make a top 3 this week. We've got a top 5.
It's incredible. Everybody is feeling the heat a little bit. I think every situation kind of comes with this existential pressure that we all have, and that has manifested itself this week in our Gillette pressure rankings, I should say. Where will we start with the NFL?
Let's go. Yeah.
So Odell Beckham Jr. has done an interview with Wall Street Journal. Not that another interview is needed or anything like that to kind of intensify the situation for the NFL, but this is the latest piece of big news that we have. It was an interview that was done a few weeks ago by all accounts, so perhaps his opinion on things isn't quite up to date, but what he's saying that everything that's going on, it doesn't make any sense why we're trying to do this. And he's talking about the NFL coming back to play. His people have been contacted by various media organizations around the United States, and there's no sign that he is going to opt out, as a lot of players have, from the upcoming NFL season. But in this interview, he says, we're not ready for the football season. Why are we trying to push forward? It's obviously for the money. And that bothers me because there's always been this, and I hate saying this, but the owner's attitude is, oh, we own you guys, and just kind of that unfairness going on that they don't see us as human. I just feel that the season shouldn't happen, and I'm prepared for it to not happen, and I wouldn't mind not having it. So it's going to be a big week. Thursday, 4 o'clock in New York. New York time is the deadline for players to opt out for the season ahead. Currently, it looks like it's going to be fine. It is still been a bit of a disaster for the NFL in terms of any opt-outs. You don't want any player to opt out. You've got the Patriots who've been absolutely ravaged by opt-outs at this point. 5 different players have opted out. Same with the Detroit Lions, who put 5 players on the reserve/COVID-19 list last week. And then you had the Eagles head coach, Doug Peterson, who's tested positive as well. So all these things are trickling through. Whether or not there's going to be enough come Thursday for the NFL to put a pin in the whole season, I'm not quite sure. But still, given the amount of money on the line, it is quite the week that the NFL face this week if you've got people like OBJ coming out saying this sort of thing.
I can't see... Well, look, okay, there's no point in making predictions because the way that America has handled the entire thing has not been good so far. I think we can all agree that there were a million different things that they could have done that would be better than the outcome that they've had. So there is a possibility that there is no season. That's definitely on the table in a way that it shouldn't be. There should have been ways that they could have decided that something will happen. My instinct is that it'll be a shortened season, that we'll see, and the way they've designed everything, that season can telescope quite significantly. It can also roll on into February and March next year if it needs to be. Next February, for example, the Super Bowl is due to be in Tampa. There are no other bookings, or else they've got that whole thing booked for the whole month. So they can push back the Super Bowl, and there's always a 2-week break before the Super Bowl anyway. So there's loads of different ways that they can telescope the season from a 16 game to a 14 game to a 12 game to a 10 game to an 8 game season if they need to, and then have a curtailed playoff. So I expect that there will be some games played, and that might involve some teams pulling out because they can't field, or games being postponed, or win percentage being the thing that actually dictates who qualifies for the playoffs. But so you mentioned the Patriots. It's actually 8. 8 Patriots have already opted out, and there's still time. The NFL had this deadline of the following week to give players the opportunity to opt out, and then players started to take them up on it, and they're like, hang on a second, we're going to move this deadline forward just in case anybody was thinking about this. Whoosh, pull it forward really quick. So I think the next 24, 48 hours are going to be critical to see if they're going to have the superstars that they need. So far, no quarterbacks, which obviously is the kind of key thing. And if there are going to be quarterbacks who are starting to opt out, we'll wait and see. So putting somebody on the COVID-19 list just means that they or somebody close to them have tested positive, and if they make a full recovery, they'll be grand to go back into general circulation within 14 days. So I think we're going to see American football. I don't know how many and how often we're going to see it, but they are certainly under pressure. Roger Goodell is going to earn his massive $50 million a year pay packet or whatever it is over the next couple of months.
For sure. The next on our list of our pressure rankings today, and at number 2 is Ronnie O'Sullivan. I'll talk about this for pressure. This is self-made pressure here. He obviously won a ranking event aged 17, and he was speaking about being a bit of a wunderkind on BBC Radio 5 Live over the course of the weekend. And he says, I've had that expectation level from the age of 10 or 11 that I was going to be champion one day. In many ways, it is like Prince William groomed to be king one day. As a youngster, I've learned to playing under pressure in amateur and professional ranks, so I don't see it as there being pressure, but something you learn how to handle. The boy who would be king.
King Ronnie.
In the Crucible. King Ronnie. You'd absolutely think that he would do a phenomenal job. as king of the United Kingdom. You would think, but like that is. Like it's not actually something that you hear him talk about too often. If anything, you think with Ronnie O'Sullivan that it's like water off a duck's back, that the idea of pressure isn't something that Ronnie O'Sullivan is even familiar with. If anything, he's just sick of people putting him on a pedestal, sick of everybody wanting him to try his hardest over the last few years. He was obviously in unbelievable form over the course of the weekend, winning in 108 minutes, quickest ever win in the World Championship. Like this is something that obviously has been part of his life for such a long time, where you realize before you're old enough to know what to do it yourself, you realize this is where your destiny lies, that you have to become a world champion. Everybody knows that is what it's going to be, and like, I mean, that is quite a level of pressure to be like comparing it to being groomed to like a prince.
Well, it is. Sean Murphy did an interview last week with David Kelly in the Irish Independent, where he was saying that Ronnie O'Sullivan was born rich. He's one of the few independently wealthy. Now, I didn't know this. The only story I knew about Ronnie's background was his father being in prison in Thailand. So there is an interesting backstory there that I was completely unaware of, that actually he was born into a wealthy family, and this whole kind of notion of him being a working class kid made good. That's the rest of them in the world of snooker who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, but Ronnie kind of had born with a silver spoon was the implication from Sean Murphy. So maybe he is a bit more like being born a prince than we thought.
Yeah, possibly. Next up, we've got Rory Mcilroy, USPGA Championship week this week. 6 years this week, actually, since his last major win, and obviously all season he's flip-flopped a bit probably. He had a microcosm last week, good round on Friday, shot a 73 on Saturday, finished 47th. Obviously has been knocked off #1 spot in the last month and a bit. And I think Rory Mcilroy has a knack of putting a severe level of pressure on himself. Like, he's been speaking, doing media in the build-up to the USPGA, and he says, because of all that's happened this year, it has made me focus a little more on just these 3 weeks, on just these weeks that are coming up. Everything was normal, and then we had a massive gap where I had time to think, okay, what are you looking forward to after this break? It's a funny year, but I have 3 opportunities from now until November to add to my major tally. Those were the 3, even in quarantine, I was looking towards. Once the schedule was set, it was those 3 events I was trying to get ready for. So not that you needed to put any added focus on these things, considering we have this thing with Rory Mcilroy now, where once it comes to major week, the scrutiny is just unbelievably intensified on the guy. It was so intense last year at Royal Portrush, and he crumbled on the opening day. Obviously, the story on Friday was almost fairy tale-esque, where that making that cut would have been incredible. Didn't happen for him, but it hasn't helped. The fact of the matter is, he had a disaster last week in the last major that was played, and now he's talking about it again, saying, well, these are 3 events these are the 3 that I care about, and that's it. So to say that he's heaped more pressure on himself is a bit of an understatement in this case. And well, like from the very first ball that he strikes on Thursday, it'll be all eyes on Rory to see, will he choke again like he did last year. Now, he says that he didn't choke in Portrush last year, but I think that's probably a matter of opinion from our perspective looking on.
Yeah, well, they never admit that they choked. That it's like a massive dirty word, because if you do it once, then there's every chance you'll do it again. But like, he's clearly choked on several occasions and come back from it generally really well. Like, remember that time he discovered the house in Augusta that we didn't even know existed? He was so far off course. Like, what? This is a part of the course we've never seen. We've been watching this tournament for 40 years in colour TV, and hang on a second, what? There's a little house? How did he get there? When it looked like, you know, he was going to win. Rory Mcilroy's psychology is the type of thing that several PhD students will be awarded doctorates, and they will come to rival and conflicting accounts of what they think makes up Rory's makeup, because he's endlessly fascinating when it comes to when he's on, how he got on, and what turned him into this unstoppable juggernaut. And then when he's off, he's so far off that it's like, how did that happen? How can you do this? Like, when there's no obvious technical flaws. So, look, I don't know. I think until Rory wins another major, that time frame is going to be the thing that weighs on him so heavily that Would you be terribly surprised if we never won another major?
Yes.
You would be?
Because of I would be, because of the talent.
But look at the competition that has emerged over the last 3 or 4 years. Like when he was coming through, it was like there's 3 or 4 other players who are like behind him and so far behind him that we know that he'll crush them when he's on. But since then, there's just been this kind of, like mushrooms, a bunch of players who could dominate the game and who are absolutely stunning. Like, you know, John Ram is really good. We have a new number 1 this week who just took over from John Ram because there are players who are really good, who are in form and who are capable of doing whatever Rory can do. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if that was it. And that's still an amazing career that he's had.
Well, without question, and he will still go down as Ireland's greatest ever golfer, no matter what happens next. But there's just such a time frame here for him to still win another major. The way he looks after himself would suggest that he can go until he's 40 to actually be in contention, at least, whenever the majors roll around, at the very minimum. And you talk about the mushrooming of talent, and it is true. Like, I mean, the PGA Tour is certainly in my lifetime at its most entertaining right now, where every week, you know, you're going to get an absolutely quality field on the final day who are in contention, no questions asked about that. But then again, it is just the nature of the sport where people tend to flip-flop away from being at their very best. And how can you be at your very best at a sport with such fine margins? Like, I mean, even the Brooks Koepka situation over the last couple of years, where he's managed to get himself right for just the majors, is remarkable. To be able to do that on the PGA Tour, to win FedEx Cups as well as being in contention for all the majors, is nigh on impossible. At the same time, you know, he's been heralded for being one of Ireland's most talented sports people ever. So when you've got that level of talent, is 6 years a really long time to go without a major win? It probably is. And he has put himself into the mix, relatively speaking, a couple of times since then. But like, you look at someone like Jordan Spieth, who has blown hot and cold since we thought he was going to dominate the game. Like, you come back to Koepka and you wonder how sustainable is his form going to be into the future. Like, Justin Thomas is obviously world number 1 at this point. He's been going steady, and we still need to see John Ram and Bryson DeChambeau step up. So there are a range of different options where majors can go over the next little while, and it is bigger than, say, we would have previously known. But then at the same time, you're kind of looking back on the Tiger era, when maybe the field was stacked. Maybe the field would have been really competitive if Tiger Woods didn't exist on a couple of occasions as well. So I would be surprised if he didn't win one. But certainly the pressure on Rory this week.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's move on to the next one. I'm going for Brentford here. Like, you could make an argument that the pressure's on Fulham tonight, but I'm going to put it on Brentford. Naturally, just being in the situation where there's £160 million in the line is a fairly pressure-filled scenario. But if they fail to win, Brentford will have taken part in more unsuccessful playoff campaigns in the English Football League than any other club. This is their 9th attempt. Now, they've had a great campaign. They're actually their best campaign since suffering relegation from the top flight in 1946-47. That was when they last got relegated from the top flight. And they also have a new stadium that they're ready to move into. These are all a lot of factors pointing to the fact that Brentford kind of need to win tonight. They kind of need to get back up to the top. Like, Thomas Frank has come out to try and alleviate that a little bit. He's called Fulham a bigger club than us. This is not a mind game. This is a fact, he said. They got relegated from the Premier League last year and have the parachute money. So I wonder, in a little way, he's saying there, they've got the parachute money, so they will be okay to have another tilt at it next year. Certainly it helps to have the parachute money to go at it again after a playoff loss. Are Brentford, kind of the way the season has gone, are they looking a little bit ruefully at missing out on that automatic promotion place and think to themselves, we better get this done today? I certainly think so. And I certainly think that if you're picking one of the two tonight, it's Brentford who are under the most pressure.
Well, look, I think you're right. I think that when you get that close to it, so frequently the team who finishes third doesn't actually end up winning the playoffs. But what did happen was that they lost that first playoff match in, not great scenario and managed to come back from it. So they've had their wobble, and I just think that's their story is a bit of a more interesting story than the Fulham one, which essentially Fulham have been a yo-yo club for 20 years at this point, and another couple of seasons of them being a yo-yo club, that's fine, who cares, it's only Fulham. But actually Brentford coming up is this remarkable data, analysis, statistics, scouting, coaching. Like, it's a really, really interesting story, and I'm very interested to see how far that can actually go. It is something new for us to think about when it comes to Premier League, as opposed to, you know, Scott Parker seems like seems like a good man, has built a good spirited team around Fulham, and I'd like to see him bring them up next season as champions.
Scott Parker wears a tie bar, which I haven't seen too many managers do. Like, we've often seen people suit up, like it's commonplace. But actually going for the tie bar, is that too formal to be a Premier League manager almost?
What's on with the tie bar on?
I don't know. I've just never seen anybody wear it on the sideline. Is my point? You know,
are you in favour of tie bars? Or are you anti tie bars?
No, I'm just saying that I've just noticed this. Like, I mean, when you saw Jose Mourinho racing down the touchline as manager of Porto, the tie was flying in the air. But Scott Parker has taken formality to a whole new level, is what I'm saying.
It's, you know, taking advantage of all of the available opportunities and the accoutrements of life. It's progressive, I would say.
What does it say about his management style is what I want to ask, but we don't have time for that really fascinating question.
Attention to detail.
Yeah, exactly. The final one in our pressure rankings today is going to be Inter Milan. Like, anybody that possesses the rights to Alexis Sanchez probably finds himself under a bit of pressure. Great news for Manchester United this week if the story does actually happen, that they've managed to offload his 350k a week salary. 4 goals, 8 assists in Serie A this season. Hasn't been very fit. So that kind of probably raises a few eyebrows for Inter Milan fans about why are we actually going to take on the huge salary of this guy. Now, there are reports from Gazzetta dello Sport that Sanchez has agreed to spread his £13.5 million salary over a 3-year deal at Inter, taking him through to June 2023. So that way they don't really need to pay him as much every single week. Still, I'm not sure that's actually something that a player would ever do. Like, I mean, like, if you take the Gareth Bale situation, nobody can blame Gareth Bale for sitting on the bench when that is the most amount of money you can possibly make. So maybe this thing doesn't happen, but if it does, you're looking at Inter Milan saying, responsibility's on you to ensure this thing works out.
I think that Manchester United are paying some of this as well. I think that this deal is going to end up being, there could be a 30 for 30 on Alexis Sanchez contracts from the time that he joined Arsenal to whenever he finishes football, and I would watch like a 10-part episode to see exactly who got paid when and how they managed to negotiate the various stages of the deal that they've negotiated. Because I think that one of the just piecing this together, the Inter deal, they're going to pay him his full whack for the first of the 3 years, and then years 2 and 3 will revert to something close to a normal salary. That was how one of the papers reported. I think it's essentially what you're saying is that they top load the first year, and then years 2 and 3 he essentially takes a pay cut. Somebody else was saying that perhaps Manchester United have actually paid up his existing contract to a certain level, which is enough for him to make the same amount of money that he would have made at Manchester United, and then get another year at the end at Inter. So it's not like he's taking a reduction. It's like a lump sum of cash from Manchester United to come off their books and buy him out of the 2 years. Inter paying him the same amount next year, which he would have been getting anyway. So it's like double his wages next year, really, or double his wages from whenever that deal is done, because he gets a lump sum. Maybe Manchester United pay him over the course of the season. So he's actually getting the Man United money, the Inter money, and then there's 2 years left at the end of it. I'm taking that deal if I'm Alexis Sanchez. Those 4 goals, that's like, that's 20 million quid for 4 goals.
But also the fact is that he is playing better football. Like, I will stress again, like, he has got 8 assists. Like, I'm just checking here, like, in Serie A this season, he's only started 10 games. Now, he's come off the bench in 12 of them, which kind of points to maybe a situation where he's either not fully fit all the time, or he's not in the starting plans all the time. It's all to do with the former, really. He just has been in and out of the team all year with injury. I don't think that's actually a bad tally. I think that if you're looking at it from a footballing perspective alone, Alexis Sanchez, it's not a bad tally, sorry, in the context of his career recently. He's looking at this saying, I'm playing better football, and the manager likes me a bit more. And as you've pointed out there, actually, there's a chance of me earning the same amount of cash. It's a win-win-win-win-win from Alexis Sanchez's point of view. There is no way that he shouldn't be trying to make this happen.
Yeah, 100%. One last thing on this. Manchester United set themselves back by about 18 months to 2 years when they did this deal in the first place. It was a horrific deal. Agreeing to that amount of money being in his salary, what they could have done was paid him that in a signing bonus, but kept his wages lower than other people at the club, so that it never got out that his wages were. The reported figure is actually 500 grand, not the 350. That 350 is some kind of basic. And obviously he hasn't been playing to get the accelerators, but you've got to assume that they're paying him some of those accelerators to get him off the books. So look, that was a catastrophic moment in the management of Manchester United that has had knock-on impact in them having to pay everybody else. Like the contract that they were given, those kind of bit part players over the last 18 months, where everybody was like, oh, this guy's actually, he's not bad, you know, he's starting to contribute, and then not contribute at all until the very last second of the season, as we've seen in one famous instance over the last 12 months. Those contracts did not do Manchester United any favours, and I think have prevented them from having the strength and depth they need to challenge next year. So knock-on impacts all around. That is this week's pressure rankings, right?
It is. I think the official line from Manchester United on that is we all partied.
They did, it turns out. Right, Eddie Brennan is going to join us next here on OTB AM this Tuesday morning. First, though, let's hear from the Sunday paper review on Bryson DeChambeau's chances in the PGA Championship this week.
I see he even said last week that he's planning to live until he's 130 or 140 years of age, because he thinks that's possible with today's technology. So, I mean, I mean, we may not be around to see if he lives out that prediction, but he's clearly thinking outside the box, certainly in his thinking. But I mean, he's had this issue in recent weeks where he doesn't actually like the intrusion of the cameras, and he takes on the rules officials publicly. Like he's had, I think Lawrenson mentions that on Thursday at the FedEx International, he argued for a free drop because fire ants were within the vicinity of his ball. Now, like, golf is supposed to be about the great honour of, like, you call your foul. Anytime someone calls their ball moving, they're like hailed as a heroic figure. Whereas Bryson is more so, it's almost like he's calling for VAR all the time in terms of what's going on. And I think Koepka was actually playing yesterday and made this joke about, I think there might be an ant on my ball.
Yeah, he said to his caddy, I think there's an ant. And then his caddy goes, seriously? He goes, I'm joking.
He can't help himself. But I have to admit, like, you know, it's sort of hearing all of this and seeing this is possibly more absorbing a sporting spectacle than every shot having someone shouting mashed potato or something, you know. I'm actually really looking forward to the USPGA, and I know golf isn't everyone's thing. I'm not sure if Kieran's a big golf fan, but I'm actually interested. But I mean, yeah, there's a lot in this piece just about how he's you know, he talks about how he wants to make the old golf courses obsolete. He's talking about one of the 13th, which is one of the classic holes in Amen Corner at Augusta, and he has this new plan now that's going to smash the ball onto the 14th fairway. And like the traditionalists are horrified by this, and he's very hard to warm to, but he's sort of interesting. And I must admit, you know, I don't particularly like him. I actually think that there's still, you know, valid points to be raised and not to be sort of flippant about the sudden expansion and you know, the dominance and you know, there's a lot in that, but I suppose you need more to go to it than just speculating. But there's certainly a lot in that. But at the same time, you sort of find yourself turning him on when he's on the telly, and that's probably not a bad thing in terms of drawing people into it.
Yeah, golf has its villain for sure. 22 minutes past 9 here this morning on OTB AM. We're turning our attention to hurling, and we also want to talk about this. It's the Don't Cook Yourself campaign from the Marie Keating Foundation, trying to raise awareness around the dangers of melanoma skin cancer this summer, particularly amongst men. Even on your staycation this summer or while you're outside in the garden, you have to take care. Ireland has one of the highest death rates from melanoma in Europe, and the rate of cases is on the increase. Eddie Brennan is an ambassador for the Marie Keating Foundation, and he joins us now. Eddie, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Morning, Ger. How are you doing?
This is obviously something that we should all be a little bit aware of. I know myself from sitting in the garden that I kind of have to be nagged to put on some sunscreen, but you start reading about this thing, stuff like this from the Marie Keating Foundation, you think, okay, well, actually, I kind of need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you said it there about the highest, you know, we're actually the second highest in Europe. So I think if people were in Ireland were to sit up and say, you know, listen to that and say, well, how is that? Because we certainly don't probably see the level of sun that we would normally associate with I think we associate sun cream with going to the continent on holidays and putting it on because it is that warm over here. So I think it's possibly a level of awareness that's not there at the moment. I'm involved with the Marie Keating Foundation on this camp the last 3 years, and just something that I suppose is maybe, it clicked with me a little bit because from my own youth and that, you were on a farm and sometimes the weather was really, really warm and, there wasn't a sign of sunscreen in sight. That's probably the biggest thing. But for me, look, when you see the figures and when you see the stats, you're kind of going, that's something that jumps out at you a little bit. And maybe there's a lot of people in Ireland, maybe on days that it's a bit overcast, but it's really warm. I think the dangers are exactly the same then as when the sun is shining. So we definitely probably have to open the minds a small bit more to it. And like you said there, Ger, I think the majority of Irish men are the ones that have to be nagged cream. So from even from what I know of it since I joined, is just even to put on in the morning, it's some form of protection anyway, and particularly looking at it, be it the golf or the outdoors or whatever over the last few months, because the month of April into May was phenomenal when we were all off on the initial stages of the COVID.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the advice as well from Marie Keating is 90 minutes, about the length of a football match, is about the time when you should update it again. So no harm to go again. You mentioned about being outdoors. Like as an inter-county manager, are you down helping out with the club? Are you going to matches? What's your access to watching and being involved in games at the moment?
It was just more, I suppose, when the gates were opened in terms of bringing the guys back to the clubs. It was just back with trying to organise maybe under nines, and that was late enough. It was probably the start of the end of June into July was when that phase kind of opened up. So it was just back with the under nines in the club, and obviously with the county, it was just maybe a bit of contact with the lads, checking in with them, making sure that they were kind of keeping tipping away. And after that, then look, over the weekend, their club matches kicked off in Laois and around the country. There's been some brilliant stuff to watch on television, but also, being able to get there and see a couple of matches live there. It's just getting back into the routine of things. And for me personally, I think I found it's hard to get into it because when you're preparing for a year ahead, you kind of set your routine days that you're going training, and you'll have your little tasks that need to be done on a daily basis. Whereas now, all that it's just on hold, and there's not much you can do. But I suppose it's getting to the point now where, all going well, that you're kind of starting to, put all the things in place to get going, because when and if it does go ahead, I think it's going to be flat to the mat for a couple of weeks. But yeah, just keeping tabs on the club scene, keeping tabs on stuff like that is as much as it is at the moment in terms of county.
There's been a few thought-provoking pieces from various journalists and commentators saying that the club players, there's a piece today, John Fogarty saying this is halcyon days for club players, and will they ever be able to go back to the scenario that they've had in previous seasons? You've obviously seen both sides of this in recent years. It does seem that the club players are really enjoying being front and centre, and the TV cameras and the reasonable weather, not great weather, but reasonable weather for both hurling and football. And you can see how, if this was, if you are a club player and your sport is hurling, that actually playing championship matches in summer with a dry sod and a good ball, that's kind of what you'd want, right?
Yeah, it's a huge novelty. It's something that probably more than ever now, I think, if this is not the catalyst for sorting out our calendar, I think nothing will. We all know the place that the county has. It's definitely the show pony in terms of, commercialism and all that kind of stuff. And I think we all understand that it's the one that captures the imagination. But equally, if not more, the club scene has really, made its statements this year, I think, and it's circumstance over control. But to be able to sit down on, a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night and say, county club matches will I watch, Glen Rovers and Finbars the other night, you got a real spectacular free-flowing game of hurling, there's some matches going on in Kilkenny. So there's loads of stuff to watch, and I definitely think, more than ever, the difference with county and club hurling from a player's perspective, in my opinion, is that when you get back to your club, like that high pressurised situations, and again, pressure is part of what's, I suppose, enjoyable about county too, of performing on the big days. When you get back to the club, you can kind of, that same pressure to be at training, an hour beforehand or whatever else it is. It's just a little bit more pure hurling in that you can go and hurl, you can just go and let fly. You mightn't specifically have, a very distinct role that you're kind of somewhat limited. You have a job to do for the team, and we understand that. But I suppose when you get back to your club, you can really, really, the pressure is off. You can let fly, you can really go and enjoy your hurling. And for the county guys this year, I mean, what a summer it's been. I think the downside has been that unfortunately the crowds haven't been able to enjoy it. They'll have to, watch it online.
Yeah, I mean, it does pose a lot of questions, like how do we keep this, but also at the same time make sure that we still have high quality inter-county matches? Is it possible that we can have the best of both worlds?
It's hard to know really, because there's obviously a lot of stakeholders involved, and certainly having wearing the inter-county managers, you get that. But unfortunately, to find that, I think we have to get all the people involved around the table and look at it. And I sometimes always look across at maybe the rugby one. And again, I don't know it, that well, but there seems to be different segments of the year where they're with their clubs or where they're with their province, and then they're with the international setup, and there seems to be, that seems to be managed a little bit better. So in terms of that, I think, there's no reason why we can't maybe break down the year a little bit, put in different competitions at different times. And I think the GA have to be very firm with it, or the powers that be it clubs and different things. And I think if you're going to offer a county manager, say, listen, you have 6 weeks to prepare your team for that championship, or 2 or 3 matches, grand. There is then a break of 2 weeks, and you're not allowed, you can monitor injuries, but there's no collective training or something like that. So they're back with their clubs and let them go enjoy the club scene, because I think that club months that in, I mean, maybe the thought behind it was well, well intentioned, but it certainly wasn't anything, because training camps, there was different things going on. So I think you just have to bring everyone in around, and it's a level playing field for everybody if that's the situation. But I think we see, some people have spoken about, heard Michael Duggan saying about the inter-county thing. Obviously, enough competition being what it is, you look at what the winners are doing and say we have to surpass what they're doing. So if they start training on the 24th of November, well, we'll have to go to the 24th of October. And it's just, I think the demands being placed on inter-county players are going through the roof. So in that regard, I think having a healthy balance will be good. I mean, there's no reason why even in the middle of the summer you can't be playing provincial, championships over a couple of weeks, take a break, and then go up to the next phase. But I suppose some counties have the whole situation with dual counties, and that just makes it very difficult to manage.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. One last question on this before I move on. Has this changed how you deal with your players as an inter-county manager, or if you're going to have a long-term future involved at inter-county level, about what you would ask from your players? And is that different from what you would have been asked of when you were playing?
Possibly. I think the whole lifestyle side of it has definitely changed. There's no wriggle room kind of for lads to have a little bit of downtime. Again, I know, we're looking at professional sportsmen. They seem to have a good balance in that they don't have to work either. So I suppose that's the way it is in professional sports. But I personally, I think there's too much training going on from the inter-county side of it. I think for me now, looking at what's coming down the tracks in terms of the Laois versus Dublin, you have a window, and that's the way it is, and you have to deal with that. I suppose we don't get into the whole situation of the pandemic that's at play, because I think, obviously everything hinges on what happens with that. But I just think I think all anybody wants, players and management, is you set down, this is what you have, and you build your plans around that. And I just think definitely the level, the amount of training that's required, and some counties, look, when you build up 3 or 4 years of good condition, that carries itself from one year into another. But if you're a team that's trying to bridge that gap, you have to do a little bit more. You have to, buy into that lifestyle. And I think the modern day county player is definitely training equally, if not harder, than some of our professional sports colleagues. So I think the demands being put on them are more and more. It's brilliant to see that they're willing to do it, But I still think that there's far too much training going on, and I think it's something that maybe, I've no doubt some county boards are struggling with that financially, but it's something that maybe we need to look at, like that we did bring in this closed season, but the closed season is, it's there, but, how strictly it's been adhered to, and that I don't know. But I just do think we need to be, maybe look at that and try to tighten it up a little bit.
Is the current situation, Eddie, actually almost one way of finding a solution to that, where you have the club fixtures that have to go first, and therefore your time with the county is naturally restricted, and the amount of hours that you have to train then are also restricted?
Yeah, it is. I think it has been good in that regard. I think, if anything, it has afforded an opportunity to look at that, and I do think that the people sit down with, I do know, Pádraig Fanning down in Waterford has been looking at the calendar year, and he has taken on maybe a body of work himself, looking at that, and you'd say, surely to God, we can put together a working group and bring in the people that are, the people that have a vested interest in this, and say it's within the GA's interest in doing this. Like, and I know maybe, presidents move on or different things, but I think it would be an unbelievable legacy for some GA presidents to have it on his as a legacy when he left, and said, look, we finally, once and for all, and again, there'll always be tweaks, there'll always be issues, and that's okay, but I think there should be a huge drive made to try to put together a proper calendar year. And I think if you were to turn around and get some former players involved, maybe get some inter-county managers involved, club guys. I mean, the club at the end of the day is what's going to be supplying our county teams in years to come. And I think the one thing you don't want to see, and I admittedly was, I suppose, vocal this and saying that perhaps the GPA and the powers that maybe didn't get stuck into this enough, and say what we don't want is everybody fighting with each other, because everybody wants to play, everybody wants to participate, and what you don't want is a situation where the club and the county players and club managers and county managers are fighting our heads in relation to this. And I just think if we can go and try build a calendar, and that will probably on an ongoing basis need to be tweaked from year to year. But this has given us, whether we like it or not, this has given us a great way of doing it. Say, look, there's the example of how it's done. We've had to do it. So if we had to do it and we have to make it work, then surely with a little bit of cooperation, we can fix that and put in place a good structure that might be functional for the year going ahead.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work, we'll change it. That's the other thing, is like to be open to change.
Yeah, I think so, Ger. I think this thing of kind of, sometimes with Congress, when they put in something, it's approved in April, and it's the following year before it actually comes into play, and then it takes another 3 years before that system is it's in for 3 years. I just think if in an ideal world, if we could sit down, build a calendar and say, look, this is what's going to happen. This is 2021. Let's see how it goes. And we will see then after that, we'll review it on an ongoing basis, turn around and say, look, the B and C didn't work, right? We'll just tweak that a small bit and see if we can make it work. Look, nothing is going to be perfect, but I definitely think if you can keep people happy, all people involved happy, I think the players themselves will enjoy it. I think the players themselves are probably enjoying the fact that they're around the locality the whole time. They're able to go into their clubs a little bit more and still be able to go along and play an inter-county season over a shorter period of time.
Yeah, I think the common sense approach there makes a lot of sense, and hopefully this is an opportunity for everybody to learn from that as well. So we're talking with Eddie Brennan here. Eddie, one of the things that we've done recently, we asked Tommy Walsh to name his hardest hurlers. He had Brian Hogan at number 5, Johnny Glynn at number 4, Mike Houlihan was number 3, Johnny Marr was number 2, and The Rock was number 1, interestingly enough. We've asked you to come up with the 5 most lethal corner forwards, or inside forwards, I suspect might be a better way of phrasing this. Who, I don't know if Tommy had rules, if he had to have played against them or if he had to have seen them, but we've asked you for something similar. What have you come up with?
Yeah, well, there's 2 on this list that I haven't played with, and they'll be interesting ones. But I suppose, look, it was hard to know. I was like, do we go with lads that I looked at growing up, or lads that you'd never seen, or whatever? So I suppose went with maybe the 80s through, the late 70s into the 80s, when I suppose I was born in 78 and I wouldn't have known so much from then, but just lads that you would have seen through the 80s growing up. And I suppose at number 5, what I've started with is a guy who maybe by modern day standards, you'd look at him and go, he doesn't look like the modern corner forward, but he was absolutely, that was Sean O'Leary of Cork. He was just, for me, a goal poacher supreme. I mean, he just knew where the right time. And if you look at a lot of his goals, even, they were just tap-ins. They were just from hanging around the square. And I remember when maybe you start off playing, the rule for the inside forwards was, stay close to the goal. And, if it drops in, because everything was route one, there was no such thing as putting the ball low into the corner in front of you and take on your man, as the game was when I started playing. It was to stretch backs, whereas with that, it was stay close to the goal. And I think at the time, that Cork team, will say, from that 1-3 in a row from, 76, 77, 78 right through the 80s into the 90s. Like, they had some great goal scorers. And, John Fitzgibbon was another guy that I really admired growing up. But I just thought Sean O'Leary, and you look at even his robust style, he certainly wasn't going to cover 4 kilometres or more. But usually it was, the quality of his runs more so than the quantity.
Deadly with the hand pass as well. Who's number 4?
4, I went for a lady who has gone across, and she's doing a bit of club coaching here, but an absolute icon of Kilkenny camogie, and that was Angela Downey. I seen her playing for Kilkenny for years, and I don't know if I met a more determined, even borderline angry forward that just wanted nothing else but to score goals. And I grew up, our club at home, St. Bridget's, would have played in county finals against Angela's club, St. Paul's, and then Liz Downey later on. And she just, I don't know if I've ever seen a full forward that was just more aggressive in front of goal. She was so determined, and I think there's no doubt about it. I'd love to have seen if this lady playing against in men's club hurling. I think she would have been equally as good, because she was just so driven. We seen her one day even scoring a goal, and some of her gear, the skirt was torn off her, and it didn't even stop her going in and scoring a goal against Cork one year.
Okay, that's perfect. Angela Downey is number 4. Who's number 3?
Number 3 then, I suppose, a guy that came into St. Kieran's for the last 2 years, and we'd like to claim that we taught him how to hurl in Kilkenny, but we didn't. Owen Kelly from Tipperary, I just think, again, another guy. I admire guys that use their brain in front of goal, and I think Owen would have been that way. He was like a good snooker player. He was thinking 2 or 3 shots ahead. As soon as that ball was landing or bouncing, he had it in his head what he wants to do. I saw him in a Colleges All-Ireland one year. I think he scored 2-7. And he just always had a goal. Even with tip, I think sometimes he just passed the ball to the net. There was no such thing as trying to break the net. He was capable of doing that as well. But he just was really, really tidy around the goal. And I think if I'm looking at young lads and saying these are the guys you need to look at, it's Owen Kelly. The brain was always work.
Yeah, a giant hurling brain. Right, so if Owen Kelly's only number 3, I'm looking forward to hearing who number 2 and number 1 are. Who's number 2?
Number 2, I don't know, Jerry. I kind of looked at the modern guys and split. I can't decide because I just be biased towards one man. But I think at the moment, with modern day setups and with how we're clouding defences are being, crowded, I still think to see the way that TJ, Patrick Horgan and Shane McCallan are able to get goals. I think Shane McCallan last year, all the goals he got in all the championship matches were different ways. Patrick Horgan, we got a taste of him the other night in the club match, but TJ as well. I can't split them, so I have a trio there, and I just think modern day hurling, it's a surpass. I think he's broken 30 goals in a championship career, and he's put his powers, but they're phenomenal, the whole 3 of them, and I just can't separate them.
Is TJ more not quite an inside forward? I suppose that's what we're looking for.
Yeah,
in that he
I suppose
plays a lot of hurling in the half forward line.
Yeah, I do. I think he has gone out there, and the goals he's getting maybe are coming from place balls a little bit. But for me personally, I thought in 2014 when Kilkenny won the All Ireland, they beat Tipperary. I thought that day, that to me that was the place I'd have been, and I think a new challenge for TJ. I'd love to see there. I just think his brain is so sharp in around the square, and I don't think it would bother him to have 2 lads following him around. I think he would embrace that more. And I felt, look, in 2016 at the loss of Michael Fennelly, I think if there was one place Tipperary and Michael Ryan wanted to see TJ lead, it was back up the field, not on the edge of the square.
Right, that's interesting. So like the next couple of years and the final couple of years of TJ could actually be unbelievably dynamic if he was to stick close to goal.
Yeah, I think I'd love to see him there. I think sometimes you have different guys and they play, like someone like TJ could play anywhere. There's nothing but that. And in 2016 they had put him out maybe to midfield to offset the loss of Michael Fenley. But I just think now he's probably at a stage. Yes, he's a great ball winner. I suppose that's one of the key things is that Brian Cody's teams, he always needs ball winners around that 45 yards area, and in the absence of maybe an abundance of those at the moment, it's a necessity that has to, you want him on the ball as much as possible. But I do think with modern systems, with the way it's tweaking a little bit, I think, can you imagine for an opposition team if they have to deal with him inside? And I think, again, like I said, 2 defenders wouldn't face him whatsoever.
That makes a whole heap of sense. And it is unbelievably competitive between the three of them. Seamus Callan's touch is obviously sensational. He's got a deft touch, which, you know, very good touch for a big man, but it's like unbelievably deft at times when he needs to be, and has the power if he needs it as well.
Yeah, he's everything. Like, and again, I remember looking at this fella, you know, around 2011-12 when he was breaking into the scene a little bit, and you weren't sure, but he has just matured so much and into a phenomenal player. And like I said, this year, like he's after blowing records out of the water as it's going along. I mean, I think because of the way he's playing over the last couple of seasons, and again, you know, on the tip club scene, he plays out the field a bit. He'd be really, you know, take the 2016 final, he got 8 points in that All-Ireland final. He was phenomenal. I think he has really embraced the lead, and like last year, you take against, you know, Wexford, sometimes he's willing to take 2 players out of the match and that's what he takes. You know, you take a few go from the Munster final. You know, they had De Borca back on him and Barry Coughlin on him, and he still was able to get his goal. So for a big unit, he is just so skillful.
Eddie, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Okay, no bother, lads. Take it easy.
Eddie Brennan there, who's an ambassador for the Marie Keating Foundation, who is essentially telling you all that irrespective of how sunny or cloudy it is, Ireland don't have a great record when it comes to using sunscreen properly, particularly Irish males. So if you can, and you should, get some sunscreen on you there. So it's Don't Cook Yourself is the campaign they have going at the moment, and a bunch of different people are ambassadors for that, and you should check it out on the Marie Keating website. So the 5 it was actually 6. It was a sneaky extra head on Mount Rushmore there. Shawnee O'Leary, Angela Downey, Owen Kelly, and then a trio of Seamus Callan, TJ Reid and Patrick Horgan. Not a bad list, Owen, it turns out.
Yeah, cop out not picking one of them to top the list. I know it's it's interesting actually that like TJ, like used the phrase lethal. He probably is the most lethal of those forwards, but as you pointed out, the one who has played quite deep in recent times, like it just kind of shows how incredible he is, that no matter where he is playing, there's a situation where you're in constant danger when this guy has the ball in his hands.
100%. A reminder, of course, that OTB AM is brought to you in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. It is time for us to get stuck into Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros. After my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting what I did. Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
Steve, good morning to you.
Morning, Ger. Morning, Eoin.
You're on the rack today. You've got to tell us whether or not there's any credibility about the rumours that we're hearing.
Questioning my credibility, I think, Ger.
Big shoes to fill. Phil Egan and various others. Even Nathan has managed to come out of this unscathed. So let's get started. Manchester United. We're starting with an easy one. Man United are close to agreeing personal terms in principle for a 5-year contract with Jadon Sancho, as discussions continue at an advanced stage with Borussia Dortmund over the structure of the transfer fee. The end of a very long-running saga. It turns out they've been having these conversations for about 6 months at least. Will Jadon Sancho be the man to kick Manchester United on next season? How will his arrival impact Mason Greenwood's progress?
Well, he's competition for Mason Greenwood, isn't he? And that's what a club like Manchester United expect to have, I suppose, at their peak, when they had the likes of Andy Cole, Dwight York, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Teddy Sheringham all competing for, at one of their peaks under Alex Ferguson, battling for a place there. And, you know, United have always been a club with exciting attacking players. And to say that, well, they're not going to sign him just because it might put the noses out of joint of Marcus Rashford and Mason Greenwood and Jesse Lingard, some of those young players. Jesse not so young anymore, but I just think it's exactly the kind of player United want to sign, exactly the kind of competition that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will want to see in his squad for next season. He's obviously got Anthony Martial there as his lead striker as well. So he's also giving himself the options of having a couple of players maybe who can play in the attacking three behind the main striker. We know Rashford can flip between two roles. Sancho, we know, can play on both wings. Daniel James is there. He can play in both wings as well. Martial, if needs be, he can drop from main striker to left winger. So they've got a number of options then if they bring in a player like Jadon Sancho. And look, he's proved himself. He left Manchester City under a cloud. They brought him in. They've invested a lot of money for a young player of his age at the time from Watford, and it didn't go to plan. And it was because he was such a hungry player. He wanted to get games with Manchester City. He was promised time in the senior squad. I know there was a falling out then, and he didn't turn up for training, and perhaps that was just, the folly of youth. He made a bad mistake. He shouldn't have done that, but I suppose it does indicate the kind of hunger and desire that he has to compete at the top level and to do well. And he's gone on to Borussia Dortment. Yeah, absolutely it did. He went to Borussia Dortmund. He won his place there. He's scored in double figures over the last couple of seasons. His assists have been excellent. And in a league which is of a high standard, so I definitely think this is a great deal for Manchester United. And it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
It is without doubt. Now, the other thing, just an interesting aside here, Ger, I know there's going to be talk of a certain goalkeeper perhaps in the next couple of minutes, but I just think it's interesting to see the players that Manchester United are signing. And I've been on speaking to you before about Jack Grealish and how reluctant I would have been to say that he will sign for United. But the more I think about it, in the context of what's going to happen with the Premier League over the next season and a half, we know the whole Brexit thing is going to have an impact on the Premier League, and the FA have already spoken about bringing in new rules with regards to the amount of homegrown players that Premier League clubs must have in the squad. And it's just interesting to see United's transfer policy. They seem to be going for a lot of England, either internationals or prospective internationals. They've got a squad there of a lot of English players. Like you look along the back line, they've got right back in Wan-Bissaka, left back in Luke Shaw, Harry Maguire centre half. They've got Scott McTominay, who qualifies as a homegrown player. Then their front line, then Marcus Rashford, Mason Greenwood, Daniel James, bringing in Jadon Sancho. I think this is interesting if you look at it in that context.
Yeah, look, it's a good point, and it kind of brings me nicely to the goalkeeper. The issue that we're talking about here is rumours about perhaps Kasper Schmeichel being one of their targets. He's 33 at this stage. Obviously, a long history with the club. There's that famous footage of himself and who was the kid? Who was the other kid? Was it Alex Bruce?
No,
yes,
it was
Alex Bruce, wasn't it?
I thought it was Tom Ince, wasn't it?
Maybe it was Tom Ince. It could have been all three of them playing football as kids, celebrating their father's success. So this is pretty interesting. He clearly has the self-confidence to play for. Is he good enough?
Oh, absolutely. He's been one of the best and most consistent keepers in the Premier League over a number of seasons now for Leicester City. I was just checking his stats there over the last few years. Like, he's got incredible statistics over the last. I think he was definitely among the top clean sheets for last season. I was trying to pick that out individually, but his record over the last few seasons has been excellent. He's been the spine of that Leicester City team, the team that won the title. So he's got league title winning experience. He's played now in the Champions League with Leicester City, so he's got that experience as well. As you say, he's 33 years of age, so he's not going to be a first choice. I would imagine if a player like him, I'd imagine he does get quite angry with reporters when they start bringing up his dad, and he doesn't like those comparisons. And I can understand that he wanted to carve out his own career without any comparisons to his dad. But I think it might be a nice bookend to his career to finish off at the club where his dad had so much success, and possibly to compete for that number one role, because he will end up playing in the Champions League with Manchester United this season, and they will be competing for the Premier League title. I'm not sure if Leicester City definitely aren't going to be in the Champions League. They're going to be in the Europa League. Whether they're going to challenge for the Premier League title next season, I'm not so sure if they can do as well as they did last season, especially if they have a bit of a clear. There's talks of Ben Chilwell going to Chelsea. If he's gone, that will be a big blow for them. So I just don't know if Brendan Rodgers can get that Leicester City team competing for the Premier League as well as they did last season. So if you're Kasper Schmeichel, 33 years of age,
now's the time.
Now's the time to go out with swan song.
Give me a credibility. Give me a credibility rating out of 10.
I think this could be a 7.
Okay. We got to talk briefly about Chris Smalling here. We've done a bit on Chris Smalling a little bit earlier on. The view earlier was that once you're out, you're out. But he's played really well. He's only 30. He is English, as you're saying. So the value of him and what he's done at Roma has suddenly come up a little bit. There's a possibility that they might try and use him in a make-weight deal for Skriniar at Inter. Yeah. What? Give me the most likely scenario here. Smalling back at United and still there next season. Smalling at Roma at a cut-down, almost nothing fee because they don't want to pay any money for him, and that might just be negotiations, or he is actually something that Inter go, yeah, we'll take him.
Yeah, well, there seems to be a number of clubs in Italy, and even Juventus have been linked with Chris Smalling. I think he was one of those players where Solskjaer was praised for the big clear-out at Manchester United, that he got rid of a lot of dead wood over the last 12 to 18 months. And I think Chris Smalling was one of those players. He just doesn't want to have him back. Himself alongside Phil Jones will be two of the most maligned players at Old Trafford. And I just can't see, despite the fact that he is in England international, former England international, he's an English player, I just don't think he's got that quality that Solskjaer needs. It's one of the areas of the field where he needs to strengthen, not just to bulk up. He needs to actually get better players in that position, not just have squad players in that position. The feeling at Roma was he was playing in a back three with Roma, in the heart of that Roma defence. They conceded 55 goals in Serie A last season, which was pretty poor. Roma at the moment as well are up for sale, so they're a club in a bit of flux at the moment. I think that Milan Skriniar would be the better option. I will totally admit I haven't seen a huge amount of him playing for Internazionale this season. I did actually see him playing in person, would you believe, Ger? I went over to see Inter play against Barcelona in the Champions League last December, and I have to say he didn't stand out one bit. Barcelona played a second-string team. They won 2-1. It was a nothing group game. It was the sixth group game of the campaign. So, they were dead and buried at that stage. But he is very highly rated. He's only 25 years of age, so just coming into his peak years. And if you're going to have a couple of overseas players in your squad, what I've read about him, he's very highly rated. And Inter as well had the best defensive record in Serie A last season, 36 goals they've only conceded. They were best defence by a long shot. So I think bring it in if you're going to get, I think Skriniar would probably be the better option there for United.
Okay.
Try and use Smalling in it, make way. Perhaps maybe send to Juventus and use that money to buy Skriniar.
Okay, so give me out of 10. Likelihood of Skriniar being at United for the start of the season or by the end of the transfer window?
I'm going to give that one a 9, I think.
All right. All right, so you think it's very likely. Okay. Let's move on to Liverpool. Thiago Alcantara. Apparently, Liverpool have moved ahead of Paris Saint-Germain and are now very likely. This has been bubbling away for quite some time. Not somebody that everybody agrees is ready-made for Liverpool. On one side, I think John Giles was like, why do they need him? And then I think Kenny was like, absolutely get him in. Maybe I've misrepresented Kenny, I'm not sure, but certainly there's a debate to be had about this. Is he going to improve Liverpool, and is this definitely going to happen?
Yeah, it's a funny one because he's a playmaker, isn't he? I'm not sure if he's got that. I suppose when we think of the Liverpool team under Jurgen Klopp, very energetic, pacey kind of style, attacking style, and I don't know if he's that kind of player that you would expect to slot in there. Then again, we've seen Klopp buying players that you wondered about, the likes of Andy Robertson and Gini Wijnaldum, even going back to players like those who you maybe wondered would they slot into a kind of a Klopp system, but he was able to. Klopp is all about coaching, isn't he? And he's able to coach players into playing the way he wants them to play. So if Klopp feels Thiago is the kind of player that he needs, I'm kind of curious about just his age. Like, he's 29, he's pushing 30 years of age. Liverpool have a few players like that. Jordan Henderson, Wijnaldum, we've already mentioned. And I just wonder, maybe they should be looking at younger players. But look, it does seem like it's, all the reports around Europe. I know Raphael Honigstein has been talking about the Sky Sports that he believes it's a deal that's been on the verge of being done. So I definitely have to give this a 10 out of 10.
Okay, all right. Let's talk briefly about Arsenal. So Arteta is apparently targeting Sevilla's 27-year-old Brazilian centre-back Diego Carlos. In talks, apparently personally, with even Rakitic, even though Rakitic is 32, but you can see how somebody like Rakitic would certainly bring a little bit of stability to that midfield. Apparently they're also interested in Zaha, who's 27 and probably is less expensive this year than he would have been in previous years because there's a bit less hype about him. Willian is obviously available on a free and they'd have to give him a 3-year contract despite the fact he's 31. Coutinho, we know there's some cut price loan deal on the table, and Thomas Partey they've also been linked with. So a huge amount at the moment. Given the progress Arteta is making, should the board just back him and give him whatever he wants?
Well, look, they didn't qualify for the Champions League, which is a disaster. If you're trying to dip into the transfer market, we know, say, you look at Manchester United, they've had their debt problems, but they've qualified for the Champions League now, so they can start making deals, even paying them off over a couple of seasons in the hope that they will qualify for the Champions League for the next couple of seasons. Arsenal aren't there yet, but they do need to invest in players maybe who have that experience of playing in the Champions League and who can possibly, help them mount some sort of a title challenge or even to get into the top 4, to get into the Champions League for subsequent seasons. So I can see why they're going down the route of perhaps getting a few more experienced players. Like there was talk of Bellerin, who's only 25. He was maybe looking elsewhere. If he sees them bringing in experienced players like the likes of Willian Amarte from Atletico Madrid, he might start going, well, I'll hang around maybe for another season. The likes of Kieran Tierney, we've seen how brilliant he can be. He started to do really well. So the younger players like that, Callum Chambers as well at the back, Rob Holding, who maybe need some experience around them. Granit Xhaka even to a certain extent, he's still, Lucas Torreira as well. So I think Willian is just a no-brainer. Get him in, give him the 3-year contract. I've seen him playing in Paris. This guy is just so fit for a 31-year-old. He's definitely got 3 seasons in him. I think the likes of Amarte, absolutely, he's a really steady, that kind of gritty kind of player that Arsenal probably need, Regards to Diego, the young Sevilla centre back, I don't know. Is he going to bring that kind of experience that they need? But I definitely think the likes of Willian. Who else did you mention?
Rakitic.
There was another player. Rakitic, absolutely, absolutely, brilliant footballer, really experienced. He's played for Barcelona in the Champions League. Absolutely. If you can get these kind of players. Coutinho's another one as well for Arsenal. I think if they're looking at their budget, if they get Coutinho in the loan deal, absolutely go for it. Try and get him in, even get him in on a season loan with a view to buy once that's over. Coutinho's 28 years of age. He's still got a good 4 or 5 seasons in him. Willian's not going to cost a huge amount as regards to transfer fees and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
actually, you can transform the texture of the squad in the dressing room and the atmosphere in the dressing room by signing Rakitic, Coutinho and a couple of others, Willian, who are old and have experience and actually give those young players a little bit of steeliness. Oh, and I know we've been talking about the Alexis Sanchez to Manchester United and the amount of money that they paid, and Coutinho, he's a replacement for Mesut Ozil. He would be getting the same amount of money. But actually, on a loan deal, if it doesn't work out, you just cut your losses and it's fine. So as an Arsenal fan, would you feel a little bit happier with that and that actually maybe this is one of those risks that you just need to take if you're going to try and escalate yourselves back into that top 4?
I would have thought so. I'm not sure if I'm with Steve on the Willian thing, though. I think the 3-year contract is a bit of a stretch, to be honest. No guarantees that at 34 years of age, Willian will still be valued for that money. I think that on a 1-season deal, it would be a perfect situation for Arsenal. He's probably not going to sign unless he gets a 3-year deal, so that's the risk you're going to take. Obviously with the Coutinho situation, there was talk of paying a £20 million loan fee, and there was that hilarious story last week that actually Matteo Guendouzi could be offered instead of £20 million, which would be a win-win-win for Arsenal. If it doesn't come with too much of a financial strain, Philippe Coutinho will be a fantastic asset to that Arsenal squad. My issue with Coutinho is the financial muscle that Arsenal may need to show in order to get him to play even 1 season. So it won't be as straightforward as the Dani Ceballos move, for example. So that would be the really big concern I have there. And now the Mesut Ozil situation as well, which is Arsenal's version of the Alexis Sanchez contract, except for the fact that Ozil is probably going to milk Arsenal for another year.
Yeah, pay him off, whatever it takes to pay him off to get him out, to get the bad smell from everybody. When that guy's still getting paid more than I am, and he's still sitting. That doesn't work in a dressing room. Last one, James McCarthy is being linked with Villa, Leeds, Newcastle, and West Ham. Apparently, this was from a scenario last season where we weren't sure if James McCarthy was going to play in the Premier League again. Even at Christmas, he hadn't played that much, and then back in the team, back looking fully fit again. Most of the injury worries behind him. He's only 29. He's got incredible levels of experience. What do you think? Should McCarthy get a move? Do we want him to get a move?
Well, I think it depends with Crystal Palace and what their next step is regards to their manager. I think if Sean Dyche is coming in there instead of Roy Hodgson, if I was James McCarthy, I'd hang around. But if Crystal Palace are keen to sell, I see that they want to recoup their $8 million that they spent on him last summer, which I think is a pretty fair price for an experienced 29-year-old Premier League midfielder. Then you're looking at it from the player's perspective. Aston Villa, Leeds United, West Ham. West Ham I was very impressed with towards the end of last season. Played really good football, got up the table. But then you would think if they're bringing James McCarthy in, that would lead you to believe that they might be offloading Declan Rice. He's going to be in there playing with Such. Like, West Ham could be a good move. I just don't know if the David Moyes thing is always in the back of my mind, thinking, is this going to go all tits up at some stage, Then you're looking at Aston Villa. I just think Aston Villa are just so flaky still. I'm just concerned. I think they're going to be in another relegation battle next season. If I'm James McCarthy, I want to go play for Marcelo Bielsa, absolutely. And I know Leeds might be struggling next season, and it depends on who they sign and what money they have there to sign players. But just the draw of playing for one of the most highly rated coaches in world football, the man who's highly regarded by Pep Guardiola and Klopp and the whole lot of them. I think that would be fascinating for a player of James McCarthy's abilities, and I think he would suit Bielsa team. So look, I couldn't say for definite which club he's going to go to, because it seems that there's so many interested in him. But if Crystal Palace want to offload him, he's got some good suitors there. And I think West Ham and Leeds will be good moves. Aston Villa, I'm not so sure about.
Definitely gone from Crystal Palace out of 10?
I've been hearing this for a few weeks now, so I'd say 9 out of 10.
Steve-O, good stuff. That's the end of this week's Deal or No Deal. Today's Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it?
We have another correction to make, Eoin. Eddie Brennan was in touch with us after the end of our slot there to say that he had to include DJ Carey, otherwise he'd be killed. So it's now a top 5, is now a top 7. And look, I can always find some room to add DJ Carey to anybody's lists, but it turns out making lists is hard.
It is. He did make the Kilkenny Mount Rushmore, so he did have enough of an inclusion in the big lists this summer. But Sheahan not on the Kilkenny Mount Rushmore, not on Eddie Brennan's most lethal forwards either. So
inside forwards, like Sheahan again, you could say he's number 11.
Yeah, he was more of an inside forward. TJ, or I suppose TJ had played there a bit more than Sheahan did. So yeah, fair enough. But DJ has to be there, I guess.
Sheahan also a brilliant corner forward when they needed him, or full forward if they wanted to. He could play anywhere, it turns out. Right, if you're watching the show this morning, you still have time to win in our 2 competitions before midday today. From the Gillette Pressure Rankings, tweet us and let us know who you think is under the most pressure to win a Gillette Skin Guard pack. And Liverpool's new jersey, win a €100 voucher for the Liverpool store in the ILAC Centre. Just retweet the show or send us a screenshot of where you're watching or listening. Tweet us at Off The Ball or WhatsApp 0879 180 180. Coming up on OTB Sports Radio today, Nigel Mansell on OTB Gold at 1 o'clock. OTB Gold at 6 o'clock is Jason Sherlock. In between that, the World Cup Revisited is France 98. We were talking about David Beckham a little bit earlier on. He features in that one, obviously. And the Mount Rushmore of Meath. Tommy and Hector are giving us our thoughts there. And then tonight, live from 7 o'clock, it's Joe Malloy and the team bringing you news and analysis and reaction to everything that's happened. If you missed this morning, you can catch it back through the OTB AM podcast. It's time-stamped as well, so you can flick through it for ease of access. And the best place to get that is on the OTB Sports app. And make sure you hit the subscribe button. So if you turn your notifications on anytime we update it, we'll let you know that has happened. Tomorrow we'll be joined by Arsenal legend Charlie Nicholas, Irish footballer Louise Quinn, who's just joined Fiorentina, and much more as well. We'll see you then. Best of luck.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.